Yo, yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actual Live Podcast. I am Chris,
I am DJ.
and today we are going to continue our coverage of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. If you guys happen to like music, particularly rock music, our band American Dharma has shows coming up on actually the end of the month, March 31st. We're going to be playing with Cannon Hill and D. Calhoun up at Granny's in Winchester, Virginia. That's March 31st. Check it out. Look us up on the social places, Facebook and all that, and you'll see. We also have a show coming up on, I believe it is the 7th of April, and that is going to be, yes, that's Friday as well, and that's going to be up at Zen West in Baltimore, Maryland, and we'd love to have you guys out.
Zen West is freaking awesome.
That's a really cool venue.
Great place, great people. They're weirdos, just like us.
Yeah, there's like normal people and eclectic people and just your traditional bar goers, lots of really cool artist types, and the venue itself is just it's got such a great atmosphere.
Dude, they got like
enjoyed
hidden rooms and hidden doors and all like kind of stuff that lead into other
Yeah,
places.
yeah.
Like, dude, well, last time we played, Chris finally showed me the passage through the wall where this little chalkboard was, and then I ended up in this like tequila whiskey, like high scale tequila whiskey bar with like steampunk gas masks on the freaking wall,
Yeah,
like
man.
randomly
Like
in there. It's like, what?
Fallout decor or something, man. It's so cool in there. It's really
a cool
nice.
place. It's a really cool place. Yeah,
It's-
Zen West is freaking awesome.
Yeah, that secret tequila bar, I'm pretty sure, is unmarked on the street too. It's got its own street entrance.
Yeah.
And then it's got the secret entrance from the main Zen West bar, but it's not marked on the street. You just got to know about it.
No.
Yeah. That was a cool spot,
Hidden
man.
secrets.
Yeah, and then they got the secret man cave downstairs.
Didn't see that one yet, but I'm
No,
looking
it
forward
was
to it.
locked. We'll have to get Poe, the owner, to show us next time we're out there.
Huh.
So yeah, last episode, a couple weeks ago, we had to take last week off, and last episode was on Augustine and Aquinas. We got deep into Neoplatonism, understanding of Gnosticism, and how Gnosticism, Christianity, and Neoplatonism threaded together to create the kind of philosophical movements that are still prevalent today in our thinking as humans alive today. It's quite unique how that occurred.
Yeah, and at that point in time when those were being combined, we saw the separation between, like, say, the East Orthodox and the Catholic Church. So, like, the Aristotelian, which would be the Western view, and then the still mystic end of Christianity. We saw the divergence. What was it, like 1050 that this happened? So it's like we're at that point in time where there's, and the big difference between the two is, at least my takeaway was, reading scripture, and either you read out loud and you are a part of it while you're doing it, or you're reading it quietly, and then the words, the definitions within the words mean more than the experience of reciting the words. That's
yes.
kind of like how I picked up on that. You know, it's not exactly, but that's how I picked up on it. Which made a lot of sense, though. It's like, because, like, you know, why do we do, you know, group communal chanting and other things like that? And why do we do that? Well, it creates this magical participatory experience.
Yeah.
But then on the other side, to give the Aristotelian end of it its due, really focusing on, okay, what do these words mean within this grammar, within this context? And I know it can get to the point where it's like, you know, like overly semantic. You know, if you've had a conversation with somebody and be like, oh, well, you use that word. Really? What do you mean? And, like, that's the part I appreciate about the Aristotelian end, and I'm more of the mystical end personally, but the Aristotelian end, less mystical, is we do have to be quite concise in the words that we use, and maybe not necessarily using the same definitions that other people use, but consistently within our own lingo and the lingity, we use it consistently. So
Lingity.
if you use a word, it's probably best if you specifically use that word for a specific reason instead of using a word that has 10 billion, like the word people. I've been hearing that a lot. It's like, oh, well, most of the people believe this. And I'm like, okay, well, do you mean like people as in everybody or the people who agree with you? Because that is actually something, and this comes from a Gnostic end. The people, is it the people that have a certain type of gnosis, or is it just general people?
Right.
You know,
Right.
For good or bad, this idea of gnosis isn't either good or bad. It's a participatory experience that I don't want to say like, well, yes, you have it. So it doesn't have to be like, you could have a gnosis of, say, like, you're a timber framer, right? What you do is you do timber framing. You have a deep gnosis, a participatory knowledge experience of timber framing. But then there's the gnosis of, like, say, like this term like lived experience or something else like that, that's just like overly vague for the reason of being overly vague. And that's what I want to stay away from. So if we're going to go Aristotelian, let's be real sharp on what we mean about each word that we use, instead of like, well, people can mean either the people who are in the gnosis or just people in general. No. Are you talking about people in general or people in the gnosis? So it's like, frankly, what I felt like what we were discussing, not last week, but the week before last, was what stuck out to me is there's a participatory gnosis, and then there's a gnosis as in you have control over yourself personally, have control over the lingo that you understand and what these words mean and why they mean it, and why different types, like, say, like different types of poetry are the different types of poetry because of all these things in there. Whereas the Eastern Orthodox, or I guess what is turned into Eastern Orthodox, but the Eastern Roman Empire before it fractured, was more mystical, less about like, well, this means this and this means this and this means this. It's like, no, we're going through the experience of reciting it.
Things that are pointing to something.
Yeah, and I think we need both. So we can define, it's like, no, I'm actually pointing quite literally in this direction. Don't know what I'm pointing at, but I can tell you I'm 37 degrees from center, this direction. But we also need the mystical end that's like, okay, well, what's in this direction? What's this movement through it? What's this participation we have?
Yeah, we're never going to get to the end of this, but let's get a little closer.
Yeah.
Because we seem to have the capacity to get ever closer to this ineffable source. It's like a black hole that the closer you get to the center, the more information it's pushing out. Mm-hmm. This is the infinite. This is the divine. This is the transcendent source that we are seeking to approach here. So it's going to be spitting out more and more infinite the closer we get. That's understandable. But we can get more exacting. We can get more precise. As we get closer and closer and closer. We do seem to have this capacity to get closer and closer and closer. We're never going to finish because the divine is omnipresent. It is infinite.
I think
so. There's infinite room for growth. That's like how God has the self-built-in property that allows its beings to have infinite room for growth.
So there's a direct parallel. So this, say, like with the black hole metaphor that you used, there is this. So a black hole is a singularity. It's a single point in space and time, which is kind of a contradiction in of itself. But the single point in space and time, and the closer you get to it, the more there is to it. Mm-hmm. And the less you can explain, but you can get in higher and higher detail.
The closer you get, the further you are away somehow.
Well, the physically real end that we see, those are like, say, microscope technology. The closer and closer we get to things in higher resolution, the fuzzier it seems to get as you look, because then you realize there's more. There's more behind that limit. There's more behind that limit. Yeah. Oh, every limit that we get to, we realize there's infinitely more. So every limit that you find, there's infinitely more points that you can find.
And that's what a black hole is like. There's so much. Mm-hmm. The closer you get to the center, the more information and energy is being emitted, and it's infinite. You can't finish. somehow. And now maybe with the black hole you can, but in this metaphor that we're using for God, we don't know. Like, is there a
Yeah,
way to pop through on the other side of a black hole?
the theory, as I understand it, is if I was to go close to the center of the black hole and breach the event horizon, you
If we could somehow stay self-contained in some
well,
special apparatus to
so
do this,
even if I'm not self-contained, you're watching me do it.
well,
So
then you're getting peeled out while you're
well,
still
you're
thousands of miles away. Like,
well, I may experience that, but what you see is as soon as I get to that event horizon, I'm stuck in time.
ooh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's almost like the infinite looks like only one moment, and then
Yeah.
the only one moment, depending on how you're looking at it, looks like infinite moment.
Phew.
Yeah, that's the
That's
weird
a
part
head
about
trip.
black holes. That's why we're not sure what the hell they are, but we're
That's
also
a
not
head
sure
trip.
about what the nature of God is, or the nature of like what is it to be conscious, or what is it to be human. It's the same thing. The closer we get to the center definition, the more edges we find ourselves looking across.
Even from a secular perspective,
Sure,
we
yeah.
still cannot
Yeah,
explain the
yeah.
origin of this universe.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
you know.
and singularity, not in like just one thing, but all the things together and how
Or
they
some
all
of the
work
most
together.
underlying, most fundamental principles that seem to be so instrumental in how everything plays out. What is dark matter? What is matter when you ultimately break it down? What are the tiniest particles? And
Well, and there were some people who asked us,
so we
like,
just keep going.
but
It
why
seems
does
to be infinite.
why does that matter? Why does that matter? You know, that's what we're asking.
It's helped us
Well,
innovate
well,
and
what's-
create more comfortable lives.
Well, what's
for
the
more people.
well, you know, figuring out black holes haven't helped us with our comfortable life, but what utility does it function? So it's like whether you're a spiritual person or a secular
Physics has,
person,
though. Yeah.
or say a physics person, but like it will matter most to you if you're on the right track, if you have the proper aim for where you're going. So for somebody who's like an astrophysicist, their answers may not necessarily apply to somebody who's a Zen Buddhist.
Mm-hmm.
But then
That
when
was
they
the
get
insight,
talking and then they
yeah.
find the commonality between them.
There's
so
a
it's
helpful
like,
insight that we gained from Augustine in our last episode.
Mhm.
That was that reason should be used in service of love.
Mhm.
So I think what we're trying to say here right now is, as we want to try and be more exacting. We want to be logical. We want to be rational. We want to be able to break things down in a way that is repeatable and explainable.
Yep.
And,
Plausible.
Yes. And that we can utilize in our psychology and our scientific systems. So when we're talking higher states of consciousness and these kinds of things, that we want to prove the efficacy of them, the reality of them, and the worthwhileness of them, in a manner that can be scientifically confirmed, appreciated,
as in,
understood.
yes, more plausible.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for mentioning
So
this.
we want to do that, but at the other hand, we don't want to close ourselves off when we're approaching this transcendent, this that is beyond our knowing. Whether it is the fundamental origin or nature of the universe, or what is God in our relation with it, we must make sure that we don't confine God. That's
Yeah.
the mistake that we keep making, is that we say this is exactly how he is and all those other ones are wrong,
Yeah, and then we say this
and
is
we
how
start fighting.
this is how God is, and I can be better than God, and then we kill hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah.
So the one thing, like a reverse, but love moves the reason.
Mm-hmm.
There was a note that I had in there, like paraphrasing, of course, but you know, the love is the core, moving the reason,
Mm-hmm.
because you can reason yourself into killing hundreds of millions of people.
Yes.
You can't love yourself into doing that.
Yes.
So love should be the primary mover. That's why we associate God with love.
Mm-hmm.
And if God is anything, love is God, and we can't even define love either. So
Right.
cool.
Well, wait till you see
two
what happens
indefinables, you know.
in this episode.
Yeah, I've been
At
holding
this point
off
in
on
human
watching
history,
this, by the way.
This one is titled "The
Yeah.
Death of the Universe," and with good reason. This is an unbelievable episode, to really reflect on how powerfully this impacted human evolution and civilization. So yeah, so we'll do a quick overview of the last episode. Vervaeke will help us with that as well here in a moment.
Yeah, I don't have my notes
Um,
from that. I don't remember where they
oh,
were.
all good.
So
We'll
it's all
kind of
on you,
race
buddy.
through what we got here. Um, the idea that the world is darkening is becoming a more prescient and salient understanding, realization of people, and we're so we have Augustine. Good and evil. The idea of good and evil becomes super salient to him. He's going through a ton of the inner conflict. The guy is a sex addict.
Mm.
He has this quote: "I was always licking the open sore of lust,"
Mm.
which he recognized was making the affliction even worse.
Much
The
like
self-loathingness, and the loss of agency, and the struggles that came about as a result, were just like this cycle that was making things worse. And he realized he had to get free from this inner conflict, this degradation, as well as help solve the evils of the world. He wanted to do this in a way that he recognized there's a root. There's something happening in me that I see happening in other people. And if I can tackle this correctly, then I can solve this problem within myself and for many people in the wider world, perhaps. And so he writes the Confessions. And he reads Plotinus, sorry. He reads Plotinus, and in Plotinus, he recognizes that Plato lived again. That was his quote. In Plotinus, Plato lives again. And so he gets very excited about Plotinus. But in his Confessions book that he writes, he tells the story of stealing the fruit. Remember this?
And
it wasn't because he wanted to impress anybody or there was a desire for the fruit. It was simply because it was wrong.
because it was wrong. The angsty teen. No, I'm gonna do it because
Yeah.
it's wrong. I'm gonna do it. That reflection, but within a human in a point in time, not just something we all go through. So now it's like it's something. Yes, it is something we all go through. It's like no, I'm gonna do that thing because it's wrong. But now we can look back at this is Augustine.
This was this was Augustine.
So like we can look back to Augustine as like, okay, well, he's telling us the story of him stealing the fruit and then afterwards realizing like I didn't do this for any particular reason, like fame within my friend group or I was hungry or anything else. I did it because I knew it was wrong. So you're playing in that darker,
Yeah.
particularly when the world's going darker as well at this point in time. It's like, okay, and he's just a product of his world too. He's growing up within this, and now as an adult writing these things, is moving through that and using this writing as a meditation. So, this
is in recognition that there's an inbuilt drive to self-improve, to self-actualize in the human beings.
and self-destruct too.
And this is very much the work of Neoplatonists and Plotinus here.
And
And
knowing
he's drawing on. He gains this Neoplatonist worldview. He recognizes what is bringing him to his destruction, and that there is this it was profound but dark, this longing to do something, this urge to do something that just because it was wrong. It was like the antithesis to this inbuilt drive for self-improvement and getting closer to God.
Well, can I ask you a quick question about that? Do you like, and this is just an opinion question, but do you think he was, say, licking at the open wound of sexual consumption because he knew it was wrong? Like, and that's
No, I don't think, not in that case.
Would
No.
that be a
No,
because
no.
I know it like it feels good, but like even that like
No, I think that he was recognizing there the resulting self-loathing and loss of agency that was coming about because of it, and always licking the open sore of lust. I believe he recognized the inner conflict there, of course, because there's the self-loathing and loss of agency that comes afterwards.
well, it gives you
But
pain and it doesn't get
in
better.
the addiction itself, it's to the sensory pleasure. Now, the moment that he stole the fruit, this gave him this insight that we have this
but
deep within us.
He stole the fruit
So, to your
before he was
question-
a sex addict. So I'm wondering
Yeah.
if like the stealing the fruit and knowing it's wrong. So like when you get yourself into the cycle of self-gratification, when you have those moments of like, yeah, no, I'm killing myself doing this,
because we
but
do
I'm going to
this-
do it anyway.
We do this with potato chips and cigarettes.
yeah,
and,
yeah. It's a prolonged suicide pact.
shots of liquor or whatever
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
Like, We know we're getting to a point to where it's wrong.
I don't know
but it's
where I'm
almost
getting
like,
with that, but that's a question. Like
that's so deep down.
Yeah.
Because the devil, quote unquote, makes that part fun, doesn't it? Saying "fuck you" to reality. You're so confusing. You don't make sense. Our current state of affairs is certainly probably seems meaningless for a lot of people nowadays.
Yeah. That's why we're doing this. Bring back.
We're
the
trying to
meaning,
reorient ourselves to the sacred.
Yeah.
Because we put reason before the sacred for the last couple hundred years, and we can see the damage that it's done now. A few hundred, 400 years.
However many.
Well, since Copernicus now, because this episode's going to break all of this down for us. So anyways, yeah. So I think, yeah, you might be onto something there. It's a sensory pleasure, but we know that it's not necessary. There's a wrongness.
Well, and it's not just necessary, but it's also like opposite of necessary.
This isn't
it's
necessary for my survival.
This
is just sensory pleasure. Okay, I'm trying to be maybe close to somebody because I wish to have love with somebody.
Well, and
but this is not a healthy way to do it, and I keep recognizing it afterwards.
And to remove it further than say the sexual nature of things, but like how many times do you do things like the fuck it all, or I did it for the lulz. Like that's a new generation thing. I did it for the lulz. So it's like, well,
we're offended. We're upset with reality, with authorities, with the way of the world today, all of these things. We got so many reasons to say fuck you, and there's like almost a fun.
Yeah, well, there's nobody punching the face, right? So you might as well do the thing, right? Until you realize it's you punching yourself in the face, and then you're like, I like this. Keep punching yourself in the face. But yeah, sorry not to derail us, but that's a question I have though.
Thing going on in
I've been thinking about that. He stole the apple only for the reason that it's wrong, and then he found himself with a sex addiction that he equated to an animal, basically an animal. Like you could imagine your dog. The reason why you have to give him the cone of shame is because they'll lick it until it's raw and their leg fucking gets infected and falls off.
I think in confession, the stealing the fruit is something particularly special, but you really hit on something there. He's doing it because there's not a desire for it. So it's not even for the sensory pleasure of the fruit.
He's
doing it merely because there's something wrong. And so in this, Augustine recognizes like, oh my God, there's a profoundly dark counter force to the good force that is trying to turn us up and to self-transcend and self-actualize. There's a counter force that's just like almost as compelling. And it's,
if not more,
maybe it is like more compelling in our material understanding of reality and more the ego, at least, right? Yeah. To the survival side of our minds, or the survival obsessed side of us, you could say. Yeah, it's particularly salient.
And I'm not saying it's good or bad. It may be useful in certain I'm not going to use the F word because
but at the heart of it, just the wrongness. Then after that, you got excuses for doing it.
Well, it may also serve a survival purpose, like the whole idea of F the man fight, or F the norm fight the man, or whatever that like that saying is like rebel against the man and the norm and everything, even if you know it's wrong. It still serves a purpose, even though it's still the self-destructive dukkha. So it's in there for a reason, and as reasoning people, we should probably figure out why that's in there. Kind of like the ego. Why do we have that as well, even though it causes problems? So is it
the insistence to say there's something really wrong here that needs to be recognized is with the right part?
Perhaps, yes.
I think that's the right part.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the fact that we're willing to put ourselves in danger or even self-destruct on behalf of this is saying that there's a larger good ideal out there that we could be living up to that we're not. And I'm so upset that we're not living up to it. This is how I'm going to act to try and get your attention, to insist. I insist. You got to look at this.
Well,
it's not a healthy way for us to do it, but you can see why. It at least explains why people try this mode. I've went through this mode. Sure. I know this mode. Anyone that's been involved in political activism in the past or today can recognize this longing to help the world, but when we're becoming self-righteous about it and so certain that we're not willing to question our own points of view and look at other perspectives, then I think we're failing at the point of the whole process of questioning in the first place, which is to try and come to consilience and understanding and solution making together.
We become some subdominant to the mode. For my musician friends, you'll get that. But
we get stuck in the questioning, and we forget that we're trying to.
We become
We're
lazy
questioning
too.
because there's something wrong.
We
We're
can
trying
just
to
keep
solve it.
we can just keep doing the wrong thing, and it should fix itself. And once we get into Hegel and other things like that, I hope we get to talk about this idea of negative thinking. And we're not quite there yet, so no spoilers or anything. But being on the negative thinking aspect of things, just to be on there is kind of lazy because you're just like, well, it's easy just to say, oh, that will never work. Oh, there's a problem with that.
Yeah.
So that's also another survival
Be very
instinct.
immediately dismissive.
Conserve your energy. So just be like, I can't handle that. Fuck that.
I mean that's the cynic's response oftentimes.
Yeah.
We got to find ourselves into a post-cynical and a post-naivety state to where we are recognizing hope not as like something that you merely believe in, but something that you create.
Yeah.
So even in the face, so it's like a sober kind of optimism.
Would you say hope is a being
Post cynical? Because you got to go through all these phases: the cynic's phase, and the naive optimist phase to get to a sober optimism, which is basically saying it could most likely be that nothing's going to work out at all, but it feels best and it is best still to try and do the right thing to ameliorate the situation now, especially if there's a slim chance of success, but it still feels best and it is right to do the best we can with what we got anyway, even if certain failure is inevitable.
Are we not feeling creatures?
Yeah, that's it. And we're looking for meaning, aren't we? So Augustine gains a Platonist worldview, or a Neoplatonic worldview, and experiences the ascent up to the One. He has a mystical experience, but he can't hold it. He's not able to stay there because he is in this state of inner conflict still.
And also, much like meditation, the going in and out of.
Yes.
Yeah.
He needs to strengthen that muscle, basically, that meditative capacity. And he states the evil was so strong that it was like there's a hole in being itself, sucking the light away. And he wishes to find a way to overcome this. So this is probably a good point, and I'm going to be skipping a ton of notes. We've been talking for a bit here.
Vervaeke will hit it, but like,
yeah.
Well, the nice thing, and I'm going to, let me express my gratitude to the fans and everything and explain what I get out of this, even if we're slightly off topic. We're discussing what we're understanding from all of this for these past 20 episodes, trying to apply what we have, trying to use the language that we've learned through these lectures and trying to piece it together as best we can, as fragmented as it may be. And then when you watch, let's just call him Vervaeke. I feel weird using the full name. So we watch Vervaeke. He does like a 2.5 to 5 minute like recap on all the like important parts, and I'm like, damn. But then I got to realize it's like, okay, but he crafted this, so he knows where his points are.
And he's telling it in such a way that he can pick right back up, go to the next, and he knows that all the data is in the previous one that you probably watched.
Yeah.
We're trying to find a way to wrestle with this on our own, as you were saying.
Well, sure. And I've noticed like hearing how you take notes and seeing your notes and seeing how I do notes, we're vastly different. And that's beautiful because it allows us to circle around, be the dancing woolly masters, being like, there's something in the middle there, and I'm not sure of that. Like, say it's like an insight or a point, because you'll pick up on insights that I don't pick up on, and I'll pick up on insights that you may not have picked up on. And Vervaeke is just like, okay, well, in this beginning part, in the first 5 minutes, and we're like, oh my God, how do you do that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so the whole point of this thing is not just for us to be absorbing Vervaeke.
Yeah.
And just merely listening to the whole thing. Like the fact that we are participating here and sharing this with you guys in our own, perhaps sometimes disjointed and a little bit messy way, is the process of humans figuring this out together. And we want to invite all of you guys into this process with us. We have to find a way to help our ancient wisdom traditions communicate. We have to understand reality together, and none of our brains can do it alone. We have to figure out how to venture forth from here. None of us can figure this out alone. These problems are too great. The myriad crises we face are too complex for any one mind to take on. Even with the most powerful AI, this is going to take
and would you listen?
Loving, compassionate, willful human beings
even if there was one person that could combine all of the summation of human experience and understanding together, you wouldn't listen to that person. They'd be a crackpot on the side of
Right.
the streets going change, change, and you treat them just as such.
Yeah.
That's why it takes all of us, and you know, we are the distributive or
Cognitive.
distributed. What's
Yeah.
that word?
Distributive cognitive network.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're doing right here. And what we're doing is we're all in class together. We're taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving through. We have free high level, you know, university level and beyond stuff that we have access to. So might as well do it, you know.
We have all this cutting edge science, neuroscience, cognitive science, philosophy, psychology
All
to bring to
together.
bear. We have our understandings of ancient history, and we can get a full picture of where we came from, how we got here, where we're at now, and how to move forward.
Yeah.
So, so I guess before jumping back in here, um, gosh, there's so much good stuff that we could discuss,
I know
man.
you want to
I'm
cover
so
it all, but
tempted.
we can't
I'm
because
so tempted. Okay, yeah, let's just jump into it. And we discussed how love and reason get pulled apart. Faith becomes an assertion of belief rather than an involvement in the flow of making the world. So faith should be understood as faithfulness to an ideal or to God,
it's
to love, to
participatory,
reason,
not a
to
thing
truth.
you have.
It's not just something you believe.
Yeah.
You know, that's not the point of faith, and that's the great misunderstanding that happens. It's faithfulness too. And the way, the distinction of the way versus just mere belief, following the way of Jesus rather than just believing a bunch of stuff about what happened at this date and this time, and he did this thing, and what is he demonstrating in his way of being?
I've got a good one.
Was he miraculous? Perhaps.
The word without the way leads you nowhere because you're just then looking at a map and reading the words. You have to walk upon the way with the word, of course, to let you know where you're going. But you could just be sitting there studying the map and you've never seen the mountain.
Yes. The menu is not the food.
But how do you know about the food without the menu? You need both.
You need both.
You need the map and the way, not just the word, not just the way, but the infusion of the two.
So here's the danger Aquinas didn't see. As reason started to take over, less and less will is driven by love. The supernatural, the sacred, becomes less real when it's no longer viable and livable to us. The heritage of self-transcendence becomes forgotten.
That's the story forgetting about the fairy folk. When you watch movies and stuff like that and you forget about the fairy folk, just clap your hands to keep the fairies real.
Yeah. Yeah, because Aquinas made a beautiful distinction. He recognized love. Reason can be subservient to love. It should be subservient.
Love should drive the reason. That's I said this earlier, but that was also he brought that up earlier. Is love should be the primary mover because love moves the reason.
Yes.
Reason can't move the love, and you can reason yourself into doing the most atrocious things, but you can't love yourself into doing that. You can tell yourself, "Oh, I'm loving myself into doing," and no, that's not love, right? So love moves the reason.
Yes.
Just like the meaning, you can change. The event, you cannot.
So here's what we learned last episode that relates to all of this. Now, you can move to more congruency. You can go through the normative order, up or down, basically. You can move up to more of what's real, what's good, what's true, or you can move down towards chaos, further into the breakdown, the fragmentation of truth, goodness, and beauty. And you get into the ugliness of evil.
That's on target versus sin.
Yes.
You know, like I put it that way, you know, like
there you go.
You're in target versus sin, and that's your directionality through these tiers of understanding.
Means to miss the mark.
To miss the mark, yes.
Or fall short or be off to the side a little bit. Or,
to miss your
to
aim.
sin. It's just to be off in your aim. Yeah. Good stuff. All right, let's jump on into it, guys, before we get...
I'm excited. I haven't watched a single bit of this next episode.
This is a crazy episode. Oh, man. Yeah, this is a good one.
The death of the universe. Oh, boy.
This is going to bring a lot into clarity. All right, guys, here we go. Episode 20 of John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, Death of the Universe.
Welcome back to Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. So last time we took a look at how Augustine drew all of this development, this very complex, sophisticated articulation of the axial revolution, drew it all together into a nomological order that brought with it the best of Aristotelian science, a normative order that brought with it the best of Platonic spirituality, a narrative order that brought with it the best of the Christian process of moving through history. And of course, along the ride comes some of the best psychotherapeutic techniques available from the ancient world. All of this was integrated together. These three orders that articulate the space of how we're connected to ourselves, to each other, and to the world. The nomological, the normative, and the narrative. We saw, however, that while this does address the fundamental axes of meaning, even as it's understood by our best current cognitive science, this historical legacy starts to come under threat. Initially, it comes under threat in, again, a way that doesn't seem very threatening. People are just changing how they're using the psychotechnology of reading. They're going from a lectio divina, a participatory, perspectival, transformative form of recitation, into a silent, consumptive model where I'm trying to consume information, and what knowledge is an inner coherence between my propositions rather than a transformative conformity to the world. And that, of course, is born out of a slowing and then slowly at first, but an accelerating rediscovery of the Aristotelian corpus and the best science of the ancient world. And there's the threat of how do we incorporate this authoritative figure into the worldview that was bequeathed to us by Augustine. And that challenge is taken up by Aquinas. And Aquinas does this, and it's hard to see how else it could have been done, by returning to the fundamental grammar of the axial revolution, the two worlds mythology, and reconfiguring it into two real worlds, a natural world understood by reason and a supernatural world understood by faith. And faith is now understood as how love transforms the will, and the will is primarily how I assert certain propositions to be true. And as I mentioned, that separation, while it solves the problem at the time, brings with it the threat that as the supernatural world becomes non-viable to us, that we will lose the axial revolution's heritage. We will separate love from reason and spirituality from science in a particularly pernicious and dangerous fashion. I want to keep going. And if for those of you who want to pursue this in more depth, I can recommend to you the book After God by Mark Taylor. A tremendous influence on my thinking, and I think it articulates a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in a very clear and perspicacious manner. But some things are happening. There's immediate consequences. People picking up on Aquinas and responding to it, and we can see it in sort of two figures deeply influenced by Aquinas, and they represent two particular lines of development that are going to influence each other. One is Meister Eckhart, and the other is William of Ockham, which is where we get Occam's razor from. a thing that is often invoked by various skeptards without a full understanding of what Occam meant by it. Occam certainly didn't mean it to be how it's often used by people in a dismissive fashion. So Eckhart represents a pivotal, exemplary, maybe even a culminating figure of a group of people within Germany, and Germany is going to be central to all of this from now on, and that is, of course, going to be a dangerous precedent to set for Germany. But Eckhart represents a group that are called the Rhineland mystics and others who bring about a transformation in the understanding of human spirituality. They bring about a change in the normative order. So Aquinas basically changes the nomological order. He separates it into these two worlds, and now there's a chasm between them. Right? There's a chasm between these worlds. Right? You can't, right? Love can't lift reason up to here. Reason has no home here, right? So a different meaning of spirituality now tends to be emphasized in the Rhineland mystics. Now, they're deeply influenced by Neoplatonism. Eckhart, I think, is influenced in some way by the whole Neoplatonic undercurrent within Christianity. There's, of course, the background history, it's still there, of the Gnostics. There has been the last crusade is actually not against the Arabs in the Middle East. It is against the Cathars in southern France. And the Cathars are they are, I would say it, some people would argue, but many people would agree with me. The Cathars are a Gnostic revival, a huge revival of Gnosticism. So there's a huge Gnostic revival, and of course there's a Neoplatonic tradition. Eckhart picks this up, and others, the other Rhineland mystics, and what they do is they bring about a re-understanding of the normative order, and it changes from being the Neoplatonic anagoge. It changes from being that whole conformity, that whole ascent in self-transcendence. Self-transcendence disappears from spirituality, as does the connection between spirituality and wisdom, where wisdom is understood as your capacity for educating yourself in self-transcendence to improve your meaning in life. Now, what happens is, instead of an ascent upward, there's more, right, God's descent downward into you. And there's important precedents for this in the ancient world. There's the theurgy precedent within the ancient world. But that being said, nevertheless, there's a fundamental difference here. Aquinas had talked about love driving the will in faith. And the Rhineland mystics, right, they're going to replace this ascent spirituality with a descent spirituality. And what they're going to do is they're going to say, look, what love is, it's not that love moves the will. Love is a way in which the will moves. That's an important change, okay? It's not that love moves the will, is that the way the will moves, right, is love. Specifically, when the will negates itself, that's love. So they pick up on, and that's why I emphasized it earlier on in this series, they pick up on the sacrificial aspect of love. That to love is to sacrifice yourself. So how is the will moving in order to be loving? Well, the will is negating itself. You see, when my will is self-centered and it's egocentric, that, of course, is the opposite of agape. I have to sacrifice this, and we talked about this. I have to negate my willful self-assertion in order to become a conduit for agape, or as Eckhart would say, to make a space so that God can come to dwell within me. So the idea is that What spirituality is about the will negating its own self-assertion and making a space in which God's will is not being resisted. So here's the idea. God's will is this agapic love, and right, we are resisting that, and what we need to do is we have to stop resisting. We have to negate our own self-assertion, the way we're expressing ourselves to press outward, and we have to make a space so that God can flow in. Now what this does, right, is it makes self-negation and this, right, it makes self-negation and inner conflict central to spirituality. So what had been incidental and contingent in Paul and Augustine, the fact that they have inner conflict, it becomes much more valorized in this new spirituality, right? I have to sort of be in perpetual conflict with myself. I have to be negating the self so that eventually I empty myself. Now, there are, I don't want to misrepresent, Eckhart is one of my favorite authors. There's beautiful wisdom about, right, about how to overcome one's attachment to one's thinking and one's self-image that are drawn from the Neoplatonic heritage and of great value in Eckhart. But nevertheless, this model of, right, spirituality being ultimately a battle of wills, your will against itself, and so it's not against God's will, becomes a central idea for what's going on in the spirituality of the time. Now that's overlapping with a new emerging worldview. So Occam sees God's will as his primary faculty. Now, some of you may be saying, well, why do we have to talk all this God talk? Look, you have to understand how this God grammar developed and how it has woven its way into the very grammar of our culture and our cognition. Whether or not you believe in a God or not is actually quite irrelevant to what I'm talking about right now. The fact is, people have, and they have sown ways of thinking and being into your heritage. So for Occam, unlike for Augustine, and I would say the whole Neoplatonic tradition, it's not God's reason, his intelligibility, that is the source of his being. For Occam, it's his will. And you can see how this lines up. These two sides. Because Aquinas has made will the faculty of access to the supernatural, right? The faculty of will becomes central to spirituality and to God here. Now, what does that mean? Why does that matter? Why would he say that? Because he sees, see, again, here's the change. It's not God's agapic love that is his creativity. God's will is the source of his ability. God speaks the world into existence. This is an act of assertion. God asserts the world when he creates it. And you say, okay, so what? So remember, your model of God, whether or not you believe in God's irrelevant, your model of God has a tremendous influence on how you understand yourself and reality. God's will supersedes his reason. Now that's very, very important. It means that God is not bound by rationality. He's not bound by how things cohere in a rational fashion. Reason is not in any way central to God. That's why the assent through reason is gone. That means that any order that we find in existence is arbitrarily imposed on it by God's will. Right? God speaks it. It's an act of will. He's not bound by any rational principles of organization. It is just raw power and fiat on his part. You say, okay, so what? What does that have to do? Well, as I forewarned, your model of how God is a paradigmatic model of how you understand yourself to be. Again, this is regardless of whether or not you believe in God right now. So, Occam concludes that we are like God. We don't find an order in the... Look, you look at... Here's my desk. Here's a book. Here's a book. Here's a book. Here's a book. These are all books. They all belong to the category of books, right? That's part of what they are. They're books. And Occam says, no, they're not. Whatever order or pattern you find in there, you're making it by how you're speaking about it. This is called nominalism. The way God speaks and wills whatever order there is, we're making whatever patterns we find by how we're speaking about them. They're not actually there. This isn't really a book. There's nothing in reality that groups these together. It is only my mind, by using the term, that groups them together. Now, because it's automatic for me, and I can't help but see this as a book, but the problem is there is no universal bookness. Forgive the language. I'm speaking, and by using language, language gathers things together in the mind, forms these patterns in the order, but all that's really out there are raw individuals. All that's really there are raw individuals, and perhaps causal relations between them. So notice what's happening. I'm reading, and I'm now reading inside my head. Knowledge is just how all the different signs of language cohere together. And whatever order there is only in here. It's in here. It's in how I'm using the language. It's all inside the language. There's nothing out there in the world. The world is now, in a very real sense, absurd. It is not in itself inherently intelligible. It's only intelligible insofar as I speak about it, or insofar as God speaks it into existence.
This is a good time for a break. So that's moving fast.
Shoo.
I'm gonna have
Oh, boy.
I'm realizing I'm gonna have to rewatch this episode and probably the previous just to catch myself back up with where we're at entirely. This is a lot to grasp at once. And this is why he's built us up to this. You know, it took us 20 episodes to get here, but that was for a reason. We had to understand the human history that came before this point. And there's more to this, where he's going with this, but already, you're seeing how our whole world just totally flip-switched, and how disorienting that must have been for people.
The massive chasm from...
And why we're still disoriented to this day. Yeah.
The chasm must have been quite massive.
Yeah, and he's just peeked the door open on this chasm. That he's going to reveal it throughout the rest of this episode. So yeah, we did understand. We didn't go into much of Aquinas when we were doing our review of last episode, but Aquinas gave us this two-world perspective, and this really grew through this period of time through Meister Eckhart and Aquinas and Occam. So we learned about the Lachlan mystics just now, and they're understanding that love can't lift reason to the highest heights. And the Gnostic revival through the Cathars.
And what led us into here is so we went from a state of conformity and self-transcendence in order to transcend ourselves to conform to the world that we're in as best as we can.
Yes.
And now we're into this completely new alien world.
Yeah, we went from a way of wisdom as a way to educate and grow ourselves through self transcendence to find meaning in life, to life only having as much meaning as we can put together with our minds through language and rationalizing what this tree is made of and this and that. The world is no longer inherently intelligible to us. God is no longer flowing through everything.
So he said something that really like it hit me hard. So it's like we went, paraphrasing of course, from a place where we are growing in, say, like growing into God. It is now, no, we're not ascending into God. God is descending into us.
Yes, and what's beautiful here is that it can happen both ways, and that there's a truth here.
Hopefully
there's a
at the same time.
There's a paradox
You know?
that really it probably is happening at the same time. You know, our sense of directionality is because what we believe we're in a time, we're in a temporal sense of reality.
But can't you also see the folly of like
So it
where
can be
this
in or
line
out,
of
right?
thinking can leave this? It's like, well,
Oh, yes.
no, we're the ones who define what God
Without
is, and,
recognizing that there is an inherent paradox and that it's both and rather
both
than
and.
either or.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we got stuck into this. So we got to either or thinking on this thing. We totally forgot about the self transcendence disappeared from spiritualism at this point in time. Wisdom was no longer gaining wisdom was no longer about growing through self transcendence to gain meaning in life.
Yeah.
It was now more self centered again.
So when
I
from
think is what happened. Aquinas, it's what had a point of talking about love driving will and faith. The Cathars had a point saying love is a way that will moves through us. So they pick up on the sacrificial aspect of it. They really concentrate on that, and then certain aspects of that got centralized in our thinking
that
today.
love is the way will moves is an inversion from love moves the will. It's
Yes.
like, well, now the will is the thing, but love is the way will moves through.
Yes.
And that's kind of relatable though. Like,
Yeah.
I've
It's
made
insightful.
arguments about love, like the true nature of love is like, well, love is the way things are expressed in the world, which, it's not either or in my opinion. It's
really
probably
is
closer
both
to
and.
both and.
Yeah. 'Cause
opposed
it's
to
also the
either or.
vehicle.
Yeah.
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 And then the idea of sacrifice, which I do really, really believe is not just personally, but also publicly important to find, to what is to be sacrificed the most sacred.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what is most sacred, and if you're willing to give that up to make things happen, that's what makes it worthy.
And
I
this
can
is
see the
beautiful.
utility in
There's
that.
utility here, and there's great.
I can also see
insight
the
here.
danger,
You know
too.
what's happening, and I'm seeing this now. This is really cool. This happened to Buddha. Remember when Buddha was engaging in intense asceticism and intense self-denial? He was just making the idea of the self stronger. What you resist persists, and he had to find the middle way. That was not asceticism of pure denial, and it was not the pure giving in to one's desires either. It was the negation of both of those and walking a middle path. And this is the mistake that we made here, where in this time of human history, we are recognizing the value of not resisting God's will, his agapic love, and that we must stop resisting to make space within ourselves to be vessels for God.
That's the valor.
That's a beautiful thing, but the idea that we must not resist is the attempt at asceticism again, like Buddha tried. That was the mistake, that we missed the middle pathway here. The paradox that we're talking about now.
It's like the note I have for this is the will against itself, not God's will, but our will against itself is defining this valorous nature. Well, because your firearms aren't long enough to box with God, so who do you box with yourself? You box with yourself.
Yeah, that's Most Def, I think.
Yeah.
That was a good line.
Yeah, it was on the Dark Star, Dark Star album. I think that was.
Yeah, your firearms are
not too short to box with God. Yeah, that was such a great line. But for real though, it's like it's.
So they made self-negation central, basically.
Yeah.
And so beautiful idea to empty oneself, of course. But the model of a battle of wills becomes the central idea now. We really kind of hyper-focused on the battle of wills part. we're really amping up the what your persist aspect of not embracing this paradox, this two-sided realization that allows us a middle
What
way.
was that lyric? Haven't you heard? It's about battle of words. The poster bearer cried. I think that was a Pink Floyd song.
I don't know the exact lyrics there, man. I don't.
Yeah.
I can't. I was trying to remember the rest of
Haven't
the
you
most
heard?
deaf
It's the battle of word. The poster bearer cried.
line that you just gave.
Something. Yeah. As the lines on the map. Something. The generals quote something. The lines on the map move from side to side.
Yeah.
This is the idea of the will makes the man makes the will, and the man makes the change. So we've kind of removed God from this whole fucking equation. Sorry to use the words, but we put the will above the reason.
Yeah.
And we've put that will above reason central to that's what God is. God is not reasonable. God is willful. And that kind of makes a lot of sense of the last 1,000 years worth of what we've been through is God is willful, not reasonable. So it's like you can justify the contradictions within.
That's exactly what I think was part of the move that these guys were making at the time. They were trying to handle certain oppositions to their ideas and their realizations.
And we'll come
the merit of the good sides of the realization. So when they're pushing against, they're creating a new focus. And they're just strengthening the egoic idea of separation again here. It's a mistake, and it's what happens, unfortunately. The faculty of will becomes so central.
Yeah.
And God's will supersedes his reason, like you were saying. It's not bound by rationality. That's why the rational assent through reason is no longer available. So how we see God, it's essential to how we view ourselves. This flip on the script for people in this period of time really fundamentally transformed human understanding of our relation with reality. And it really threw us for a loop ever since we've been trying to find our grounding.
Well, so I've got a little note to reference this pop culture reference. So there was an old Doctor Who episode, and by old Doctor Who episode, I mean chicken wire and latex old Doctor Who episode. So Doctor Who is coming across his evil arch nemesis. I forget what his name. Forgive me. I'm not the biggest Doctor Who fan, but it's a childhood memory of mine. And so there's the bad guy and then there's Doctor Who, and the bad guy's making things happen, but he's making it happen out of antimatter. And Doctor Who's like, don't you know antimatter and matter explode? They don't coexist together. And his antithesis says, they exist because I will it to exist. And so it's even in pop culture, and this is 1970s
This is a mode of thinking for us now. Yeah.
BBC touching on this. It exists because I will it to exist. Mind you, it's the bad guy. Can't forget his name. I'm sorry, Doctor Who fans. I'm a Star Trek guy, personally.
So we went from reading out loud together and recognizing God being imbued in the words of what we were reading to reading things more internally. Yeah. And then there's the switch in our understanding of our relationship with God. It's no longer
the reasonable God that has reasons, but the willful God, while we have will in of ourselves.
Yeah, it's rational because he says so, kind of thing. That doesn't quite work. The world becomes absurd. It's only as real as we can speak, or as God says. And so this is a new view of God that came about.
God speaks, we make. That's where we ended up.
We've been living in a contradiction ever since, because we've been believing this, but we've also been believing in this loving God in some respects. And
so we're using language.
Our civilization operates on a misunderstanding.
We're using the language. We're making order through language, which is making it absurd.
Yeah.
And I'd say, because language is very malleable. Language should be subservient to the reason and the things we're trying to communicate.
And the reason
the
should
other
be
way
subservient
around.
to love.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so
but without that guiding wisdom principle of love is the wisest thing, the wisest capacity that humans have access to. It's the wisest, most optimal mode of being that we have access to, loving this unconditionality. Without that, how are we going to be able to functionally reason in any way that's going to be good for one and all?
It seems at this point in time that we're journeying through in these episodes, we've really done a quite the inverse from where we've been, even from the Paleolithic transition, which has been filled with contradictions. But this seems to be a profound flipping of how we place ourselves in the world and the nature of the universe and God.
Yeah, we forgot all of our axial revolution insights, or our greatest access at this point to co-creative existence with God and those around us. We realized we were co-creating reality. Even when we were reading poems out loud together, we were co-creating reality. Now it's changed entirely. It's how can I use this?
It almost seems like it was natural that there is going to be a chasm, and at this point in time, it's the jumping off of the one wall of the chasm, not knowing there's another wall. Yeah. So there's this weird inversion.
We're mapping the chasm out as we jump around and we try the different sides of it.
As we're falling through it, going.
Because a lot of us are falling along the way. Yeah. The whole human race jumping back and forth across this chasm. And I'm
speaking, of course, within this period of time that we're talking about.
Yeah. We need to build a bridge across the chasm.
Well, and I'm sure as we go on, there are people who try to set footwork and whatnot to get the ropes across, so then we can make a thing that we can travel across and set the buttresses and stuff.
It's basically, it takes us centuries to understand what people like Jesus and Buddha were talking about. This is really what's happening. It's taken us millennia to understand what these guys were on about entirely. Collectively, for enough of us to amass enough the depth of that understanding. It's hard for even one of us to get close to that level of, but we all have the capacity.
Yeah, when we do it, we look at them like they're the guy with the cardboard sign that says, give love a chance.
Yeah,
change.
And it does become like an openness and a surrendering and a giving at once. It is a both and process.
And the accepting of ridicule.
Yeah,
if you want to make a change, you better be accepting of the ridicule because it's coming.
You can't be courageous if you're not willing to be vulnerable.
Oh, then it's not just courage.
Yeah,
it's if the fight's won, then there's no courage in it. It's that being vulnerable to getting your ass whipped that makes you really brave.
It's when your love becomes stronger than your fear.
Yeah,
your heart's more powerful than
your love. Becomes stronger than your reason.
Is what rules your body mind. You're no longer a servant to the mind.
Yeah.
But an agent of heartfulness.
Yeah. So, any more notes for you, or we?
No, that's pretty good for me.
Sweet. Oh, yeah.
That catches us up. Let's jump back.
Let's go.
Now, notice what this is doing. This is creating a radical. The supernatural world is now, right, not a source of reason and rational order. Now, all of this is slowly unfolding. Spirituality is being changed, right? This self-negation of will. The world is being changed. It's the nominal world in which what's out there are raw individuals, and whatever pattern or order comes from how we speak about them. While all of that is taking shape, something disastrous happens shortly. Overlapping, Occam's just dead, overlapping with some of the later Rhineland mystics. But what happens is, right, well, most people think it is, but what happens is, right, the Black Death. We think it's the bubonic plague. Most people think it is. And this is a disaster. Right, it lays waste to a third of Europe's population. So, in the Bible, the end of the world is predicted by the four horsemen of the apocalypse: death, war, pestilence, famine. All these things start happening. There's the bubonic plague, massive pestilence. There's famine, because there's an extended wet period and the crops are dying. There's huge war, 100-year war, the Crusades. There's the battle against the Cathars, as I mentioned. And what happens is the church creates the first secret police. The church creates the Holy Inquisition to try and root out the last of the Cathars. So there's Gnostic revival, and the Holy Inquisition is created to find the Cathars that have escaped, to find the heretics and bring them to trial. Imagine how this feels analogous to the Hellenistic domicide. People are dying, villages are going out of existence, social order is being radically disrupted, there's war. And then the church is not helping you, it's actually sending out people to try and find if you're a heretic. So, first of all, people's confidence in the worldview that they had been born into is being radically undermined. They literally think it's the end of the world. Most of the institutions and social structures are broken or at least put under significant strain. Something else happens that's really important. Of course, there's a disruption in social order. People move around, and more importantly, there's a labor shortage. Because so many people die, there's a labor shortage. And because some of the order has broken down, people are free to move around more than they were, leave the land. It's like a bit of like the Bronze Age collapse or the end of the Roman Empire. People can now engage in some experimentation. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means that there's a labor shortage and there's more freedom, right, of geographical motion and social change. People start to be able to sell their labor for more money and even to sell their labor. They start to be able to change their status through their own efforts. Before, like, you were locked into a quite, rigid social structure, feudal structure. But now, because of the chaos around you, you can actually make a difference to your own life through your own effort. And strangely enough, all of this forms a weird kind of consistency. The world actually isn't fundamentally ordered. The order is just given by God, and it can just be removed, and then the true chaos of things is revealed. We impose an order like God does, and by my willpower, I can change my status. I can make myself into something different. So what's happening here is, right, a new view in which reality is primarily being seen as a chaotic backdrop against which a battle of wills is occurring. And God is starting to less and less be a source of rational order and more to be a source of arbitrary power. Now, many historians argue, of course some disagree, that the Black Plague also opens up new social experimentation. People start to, as I say, sell their labor, start to become more entrepreneurial, are willing to move around more, and you get a rise of commercialism. Commercialism starts to ascend. Now, commercialism is really, really powerful, right? You can make use of disparity in demand to accrue wealth. So, I've got a lot of wool here. How much do you want for my wool? Not very much. I got a lot of wool too. I'm going to go sail or travel over here. Do you have any wool? No. What will you give me for this wool? Lots of gold. Oh, okay. Wow. I go back here. You know what I can buy with this gold? More wool. I can go back here and I can get wealthy. And look what's happening here. I'm doing it through my own effort. Has nothing to do with the church. Has nothing to do with the aristocracy. Has nothing to do with raising grain, farming the land. Nothing. This is like magic. Now, there's problems, of course, with that. One of the problems is political. The aristocracy is in the way. And so this emerging middle class is going to more and more challenge the aristocracy. But also, the problem with trade, especially by sea, is your ship sinks. So, well, what do? Well, first of all, you're going to create some new institutions. You're going to create banks, money to lend you so you can finance such expeditions. You're going to create insurance companies in case your ship sinks. Now, you're going to do something really important. What you're going to do is say, look, I'm not going to take all the individual risk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get a bunch of friends and people together, and like the way the church is the body of Christ, the body, corpus, I'm going to make one body out of all these people. I'm going to incorporate. I'm going to create a corporation. And what we're going to do is we're going to have shares in the risk. We'll share the risk. We'll have shares in the corporation. And when we get a profit, we will divide the profit in the end. We will have dividends. We'll create corporations and financial institutions. And then what we'll start to do is put pressure on the government, the state, to not just be working for the church and for the aristocracy. One of the things the state is going to start doing is it's going to start protecting contracts and enforcing rules on these social institutions. And you get the emergence of corporate capitalism and the corporate state. Now that's important because it means that now people have a place in which they can look for power, the ability to change their life, and for norms to govern their behavior that have nothing to do with the church or the aristocracy. Now that's very important already, because what that means is people are creating a secular alternative. Now they're not setting out to do that, but that's what they're doing. They're creating a secular alternative, a secular source of power and wealth and prestige, and they're beginning to secularize the state in order to safeguard those secular endeavors. And think about it, the supernatural world is largely irrelevant to all of these secular projects. Now this commercialism in trade also means something else really important. I got to get better at my psychotechnologies. Because I need to process information a lot better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import a new psychotechnology. Always the new psychotechnologies. Look for it. What happens is people are replacing Roman numerals with the Hindu Arabic numerals. You know these, right? You take like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Right? The Hindu Arabic numerals. Have you ever done calculations with Roman numerals? It's cumbersome and long and slow and stupid. This speeds up. It empowers you. It's a psychotechnology that makes your ability to process and calculate information way faster. It, of course, comes through, right, the Arab world because of increased trade, but also because of the Crusades, etc. What also comes in is algebra, the use of letters to represent variables rather than numbers. What comes in is the zero. And with that, almost immediately, the ability to use negative numbers, because sometime when you're running your business, you're running in a deficit, you're running in debt. Notice what's happening. You're getting a powerful upsurge in the kind of mathematical psychotechnology that is available for people. What else are people going to do? Well, they're going to improve their celestial navigation, because if I can sail the waters faster and better, there's less chance I will lose all of my profits when my ship sinks. Well, how can I? Well, I'm going to more carefully observe the stars. And I'm going to apply this new way of thinking, this Aristotelian, logical, coherent, propositional way of thinking. And I'm going to use the new math and the new algebra. So I've got this new way of thinking. I've got the new psychotechnology. I'm going to put them together and observe the heavens way more carefully. And something that had been known for a while is going to become much more prominent. The heavens don't behave in this nice, orderly fashion the way Aristotle and Ptolemy said they do. For example, if you look at Mars in the heavens, right? Mars will do this over time. It goes, wee, whoop, wee, zoom. It's called the retrograde of Mars. It's because of where the Martian and Terran orbits intersect and don't. Like as you're, they don't intersect, but like when the Earth passes by Mars. That's what I meant. And as you get this way more careful observation, this Aristotelian propositional inferential way of thinking, trying to get clear definitions, and that's allied to this new mathematical psychotechnology, people start to discover how chaotic the heavens actually are. And of course, what they try to do is they start trying to fiddle with the system, right? Okay, so the Earth's at the center and stuff's going around it, but on these spheres, there's other things spinning in opposite directions, and you get all this epicycles, and it gets convoluted and complex. And then Copernicus comes along and says, and this is really crucial, the way he actually says it. He says, the math is better if you put the sun at the center. Right? Now notice, we talked about this before. Aristarchus had said the sun could be at the center, and there was all these arguments against it. And Copernicus doesn't have any answer to any of those arguments, but he doesn't need them now, because people are committed to this new way of thinking. They're committed to this new mathematical psychotechnology. They're committed to this new Aristotelian way of thinking. And if it makes the math better, that's good enough. Now we all talk about this. Oh yes, the Copernican revolution. Ha 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 ha. We titter over our coffee and tea. Look, you have to understand what this means. You have to really get it. Let's go back. You're using this Aristotelian way of thinking, right? Remember, what was Aristotle's marks of how you determined if things were real? Okay, is the organ, relevant organ, functioning? Yes. Is the medium not distorting the information? Yes. Do other people, after rational discussion, agree with you? Yes. Remember, we did the example, if you hear somebody says, oh, I heard that Susan said she loved you at the party. This is how you determine if things are real. Watch this. It's morning. We are all stone cold sober. We all have perfect 20/20 vision. I don't, but let's say we all do. We all watch the sun rise in the east, pass overhead, and sink in the west. We all agree that that's what we all see. We talk about it, we argue about it, we come to an agreement, and we're all wrong. The air is clear, we're stone cold sober, our eyes are working perfectly, we rationally discuss it, we all agree, and we're all wrong. It's an illusion. Now here's the thing that should immediately occur. Put yourself back there. If that's an illusion, what else isn't an illusion? How do you know any of this is real? Because all you have, be honest, all you have is, oh well, my mind and my senses are working normally. Everything seems clear, there's no distorting fog or no... And people agree with me. That's what they see. That's what most of your sense of realness is based on. That's why Aristotle's view was so powerful. And yet what Copernicus is saying is that can all be satisfied and it's still not real because the math says it isn't real. And that also all of a sudden means all of this experience, all of it isn't real. Remember, we had the theory that we were in touch with the world, we're in conformity with the world. That's gone. Now, what's happened is the following. here's the world out here, and here's our mind, and in between is this barrier experience. Your sense experience isn't you being in touch with the world. Notice I'm using a sense term. It's not putting me in touch with the world, it's actually a veil between me and the world. The only thing that cuts through all of this illusion is this very narrow channel of math. Everything else is illusion. All of a sudden, you are mostly out of touch with the world. This is terrifying. It's terrifying. So you've got all this chaos going on around you, and then you've got this view that suddenly says to you, well, how do you know this isn't an illusion? How do you know that this table is here? How do you know that your mother actually loved you?
Shoo, that was heavy, Vervaeke.
Oh, Jeebus.
That was heavy. That was heavy.
Oh, man, we even got into like the initial birth of like mercantilism and capitalism and all that stuff, like where that all came from. Let's see. Hold on. Where were we at? So
well, we picked up with this idea that the sacred is no longer a source of reason and rational order. It's no longer what explains reality. We're no longer conformed with reality in the sacred co-creative relationship.
And can you blame them? They dealt with the Black Death at this point. Like
Yeah.
everybody was dying.
Yes,
You know, it's like,
yes.
dude. Like,
This is also concurrent with the Black Death occurring. The bubonic plague kills a third of the population in Europe.
it was
Death,
literally
war,
the apocalypse.
pestilence,
Like, dude,
famine, all of the ingredients for an
all
apocalypse.
the bad stuffs.
Yeah, crusades, 100-Year War,
The Inquisition.
the battle against
Oh
the
my God.
Cathars. So the church creates the first secret police in this period of time, a holy inquisition. So yeah, this period of time is very analogous to the Hellenistic domicide.
Sure.
That huge civilizational breakdown experience that was also not just a disruption of social order, but a disruption of our inner relation with reality, our own understanding of reality.
It wasn't the repeat, it was the rhyme of the Hellenistic period.
Right? Yeah,
And
there you go.
and now the church, you know, like particularly doing the secret police stuff and all that other, you know, it's like now there's a failing within this church, a feeling that this institution, the church, as well as the aristocracy, are failing you.
They're failing now.
And they're failing you. So like, what do?
There was a wrong turn taken. So this is so parallel to our time, isn't it? Now we're rhyming again here as history doesn't really repeat, it rhymes, as the saying goes. We are in a time of social disorder being disrupted, war, secret police
Labor
are out there
shortages.
searching for heretics, censoring people, labor shortages, potential famines on the horizon. People's confidence in their worldviews are being increasingly undermined. So that's what we had here.
Is that not a pre-rhyme from where we're at
And that's
right
where
now?
we're at right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
People were literally believing it's the end of the world at this time in history. You got people, of course, believing that again now. And then people just dismissing that idea entirely, so that we don't even have to think about it. Just trying to live in the world of distraction at this point.
Well, we are the ones who impose the order. We are the ones that can make ourselves. We no longer have to conform to the world. I will conform that to myself.
Yeah.
You know, that's a really big shift. That's, you know, and you know, like, to be romantic about it, that's like the idea of, like, you know, the Wild West. You go out there, you can make yourself your own man, just you and the land, and you know, a herd of cattle, and you know, but you will make it. Mm-hmm. So it's not all bad, you know, that like fierce independent individualism came out of this, which I think is really important, like, to continue on as humans, is to understand the importance of
healthy individualism.
Not the singular,
in a group
but the
setting. Yeah.
but the everything that makes up the individual, like what we talked about. I think it was last week or the week before.
That makes a healthy, well-honed, whole individual.
Yeah, being the proper individual, indivisible self that has all the
yes.
Be the good glue ball. So there's a battle of will.
Yes, battle of will.
There's no room for God in this battle of will. It's not between you and God. It's not between God or anything else. It's you and yourself. And
Yeah.
fuck nature. Remove nature.
And right before we got to that,
Oh, yeah,
you
sorry.
had run to the bathroom real fast at that point. So we had this labor shortage,
Mm-hmm.
the disrupted order, and so now there's more freedom and geographic movement and social change occurring because of all the chaos that's occurring. So people are starting to be able to sell their labor, and they can change their status, their actual place in society through their own efforts much more easily in this little period of time here during this breakdown. And so this is where new opportunity, this new thing comes forth out of this chaos. And what humans do with it is recognize by willpower I can make myself something different. And life becomes a chaotic backdrop for a battle of wills. This is the way that we actually start to view our place in this.
So self-worth, maybe the idea of self-worth.
Because we're measuring ourselves.
Yeah.
We're measuring ourselves
Yeah.
against other people instead of within our own recognition of our relationship with some transcendent loving source in the whole of reality itself.
Well, yourself, maybe the self-worth, like the...
This is where we started making that mistake that Krishnamurti recognizes of measuring and comparing ourselves to other people.
Well, worth is a measurement. How much is it worth? How much can you measure it?
Yes.
Self-measurement opposed to conformment. So changing from, perhaps this is where we're going, but changing from an understanding of conformant, like how do you conform to the environment that you're in, the world that you're in, and now it's how much are you measured within the world that you're in, and your will is the main driving factor.
Yes,
perhaps.
Yeah, it's kind of it's like we kind of changed our attention from recognizing how in concert we are with reality, in tandem with it, to how are we standing out individually that I feel safe in comparison to other people, because we're measuring how well we're doing against other people now.
Yeah.
So this is what happens. There's an increased sense of separation. And now in this, we have ongoing Black Plague and breakdown and everything. And we have this new social experimentation happening. Commercialism starts to take form. There's disparities in demand that cannot be profitable. You have the birth of capitalism.
Yeah, and it's the middle class people of the world. They're not completely destitute, but they're also not the aristocracy that are now taking command of what they have. I have wool.
Yes.
Oh, but you have wool. Okay, let me take the chance.
And
to
the
go
aristocracy is in their way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so let me take the chance to be able to go somewhere else and see if they have wool or not. And then that ends up like, well, your ship could sink. You need some type of insurance.
Yes. So ships, more and more ship trade, because we became better with math. So we started to be able to read the stars better. And we need banks to finance, insurance to protect the investment. We get our and
more than
together.
Just financing, banks keep track of who owes what to whom.
Yes.
So in order for you to be able to do your business, you can sidestep that. No longer are you hiding your worth within your own personal home, but now you can put your worth intangibly within a bank.
Yes.
And then you'll have insurance that if you pay.
We started trading such large amounts of goods that the coinage started to become necessary. Banks started to become necessary.
And numbers
to finance
become arbitrary.
Super giant, large projects, and shares and risk needed to come about. So people had to get their friends together in corpus to incorporate many bodies into one active body.
Corporation.
So they call that incorporation. Yes.
That makes so much sense, though. It's
corporal, discorporates to fall apart, to decay. Incorporate to build something new, like when your body incorporates into a corporal.
When we call it the military corps, we don't call it corpse, but it's still CORP. The corpse, the body of a group of individuals, a corporation,
it's a
group
body
of people,
bodies. So it's a bunch of people that move together as one.
That have shares within the involvement.
They're sharing in the involvement of this one
and dividends
corporal
as well.
reality. So it's many corporal realities coming together on behalf of one greater kind of vehicle that they can move in together.
But everybody has a piece of, we'll call it the profit, but they'll have a piece that the dividends that is divided that they get back.
Yeah.
So you're paying it. So this
Shares
idea
in
of
risk and profits.
paying
yeah.
into a system, then to receive a
Yes.
portion of the system,
Yes.
to have a share within the
And
system. So this
then
is
this
the point
puts
where
pressure on the state, to
Okay.
start protecting contracts and enforcing
Yeah.
the rules of how corporations interact with one another and with
That's
the public.
interesting.
Yep. Yep. So this is not a defense or um, an insult against capitalism. This is just
No,
recognizing this
seems
is
like
how human trade came
this is
about.
where it started, as
This
far
is
as
where it
we
started,
understand
as far
it.
as we
This is
understand,
interesting. Like,
It is really interesting.
personally, I'm a diehard capitalist. I know my worth, and I sell myself under my worth because I love the people I sell.
But the
myself
fact that
to. But,
the
you know.
people, any people, even poor people that would typically be lower classes and just serfs, that are actually allowed to take part in the
Yes.
market and to trade
It's
and
another-
to be mobile and actually be able to move up the ladder of society.
It's another personing
about
of
during
the
this time.
unpersons.
Yes, it was.
In a weird
way.
twisted way as
Yeah.
we go on.
Yeah. This is our best attempt at this so far, and
But
how else could we have done it at
It's
this point in
secular,
history?
so it's not religious. It's not it's completely outside of it. It's the other way.
New norms had to come about to govern the behavior of this that were outside the church and the aristocracy, the ruling, powerful people of the time. So this secular alternative to safeguard capitalism and corporations came about, and this is how we got the secular world that we have today. It was an attempt at managing things fairly in the face of powerful interests in the church and the aristocracy that were sometimes frankly wrong, and we were recognizing that we were becoming increasingly mobile and able to move up and up social ladders, so we were starting to compete with these guys, and that had not happened so much before. So that was a huge change for the world.
Oh, definitely
Being able to be
rebalancing.
upwardly socially mobile for the lower classes was a game
Sure.
changer.
And we have the introduction of a less clumsy numbering system, which makes things way more efficient.
That changed things radically. A new psychotechnology.
And the idea of negative numbers, that's where you get the idea of credit, like being in the red or being in the black.
Yeah.
As far as money goes, is like
being in a deficit, being in a debt. So
well, that's a huge
number's zero.
difference in
So
thought, man. Like,
thank you to Arabic numerals. Thank you to the Hindus for giving us this great gift of zero and actual numbers instead of Roman numerals.
and
right?
it's perfect.
Yeah.
Zero is a circular thing, so you can just attach stuff to
so
it.
now we can
wherever it
represent
is.
the negative
Yeah.
as well in
And
math.
then we ended up with better navigation.
And zeros, yeah, it's so perfect. You're right.
Better
we
na-
needed this new psychotechnology, this new technology of the mind. So the humans have upgraded again now. It's like almost like watching a video game,
And-
like seeing humanity get to this point. It's got this new mod now.
And we've upgraded, and then we realized, oh shit, the heavens or this game that we're playing doesn't behave by what we thought it had, because like if you're to use the math that we have now and put yourself the earth at the center of things, it makes these weird curly cute little things around you that don't make sense, because like doing that. But then what was it, Copernicus was like, well, the math looks better if you put the sun at the center.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to say nothing, but
Yeah,
like the math
why-
is just easier if
why
you put the
is
sun at the center.
Mars going by like this.
Yeah, retrograde and prograde or whatever it is. Yeah, okay, what
Yeah.
is that?
No, everything's going
Oh
around the
god,
sun,
yeah,
guys.
Copernicus. I don't know what they did to you,
but our worldview had switched so much at this
Yeah.
point that all he had to do was say the math is better if you put the sun at the center.
and they were like, oh yeah,
He didn't have to make any other points, and he didn't have to argue against the fundamental nature of reality to get this point across. We had really started to see the world differently and ourselves as separate. There's not a veil. There's a wall between us and reality.
This is a very, very, very impactful shift in our understanding of the universe and our place in it, because like at this point now, like with this understanding, we get to the point of like, say, like the double slit experiment, where like light behaves as a wave or a particle depending on how you participate with the experiment. And also quantum physics, which, like the fact that you're observing the experiment changes the experiment. And like that line of reasoning where you're even more participatory in this universe that God somehow, I don't know, now willed into being.
Yeah, right.
Or, so it's like this is a real pivot, like another one of them real pivotal shifts. Like, I'm sorry, like the post-Hellenistic Hellenistic era was kind of depressing. This one's kind of exciting, even though it's kind of depressing because we also figured out how to like blow each other up with like physical.
This one's exciting because we see a way out this time. This one's exciting because we have the remembered history of what happened before now. We have enough of the last breakdown to see what's happening now, and we didn't have that during the Roman era.
And
We
I think
didn't have that
certainly
during the Hellenistic era.
And I think this understanding that we're gaining at this point in time is becoming it is very potent in and of itself because of how effectual it is at allowing us to understand our universe. Now we see a solar centric and then galactic centric.
This makes me like so grateful for our forebears, for our ancestors, because they got us to this point. They got us a very well-tuned language system and mathematics now, so that we were able to create books and libraries, printing presses, and all kinds of technology, radios, television, smartphones, internet, computer now. So we have a very powerful position to be able to change the course of this cycle,
and we're really embracing math at this point. So I have
outcome of this cycle.
I have a note that I wrote as illusion or fantasy. The math says otherwise, so you can create these illusions and fantasies of how the world works. It's okay that it's retrograde and curly queuing, but the math says otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have something. We have math as a language, so we have a language, another literacy, another psychotechnology that we can use to really grasp.
Yes.
And then if we do it properly, figure out how to conform ourselves more accurately to the world, because now we're understanding really truly more of the cosmos and the world, this beautiful unveiling thing.
Yes, and so now if we can bring it back to almost like a Pythagorean approach to reality again, like now that we understand the value of this Aristotelian way of approaching reality, this problem-solving, critical thinking process, and we also are remembering, oh my God, the value of the sacred, the great miracle, the great mystery of this infinite
hopefully we'll get
universe that we somehow well within.
But right now we're just past the Black Plague.
Yeah.
So we're getting there. Come on, we're on episode 20. We've got 30 more to go.
We got 30.
So
we're almost halfway.
This is an exciting period of time for humans. Like
very,
really, like this is like pretty close to us figuring out electricity, like as far as breakthrough wise goes. Now we have the math to figure out, like to look at things interacting that we can't watch, and then measure them with math. It's this new language to be able to understand our universe.
Yep. But without an appreciation and a relationship, still having that co-creative orientation to reality, because now we're in the two worlds sense of reality where there's a barrier between us and the world.
Yeah,
and it's our sense impressions are the barrier. Our own sense experience, like you were saying, is a veil that can be questioned, that can only be confirmed by mathematics and physics. So this is like the argument that Jordan Peterson's trying to make with people like Sam Harris, the very hardcore atheists. He's like, what value, where are you gaining your sense of morality, of virtue, of what is good? How can you have it with reason alone? How can we do it without something that is sacred and transcendent to us, to which we must live up to? What other compelling reason is there, like I was saying in that last episode, to not lie, cheat, and steal, to compete and get by? Because it's a perfectly viable survival solution, right?
And beyond, how would you? Why would you?
Just laws? Is that all that's supposed to stop you? Inconveniences? Or is there is there a moral reason that is so compelling that we cannot deny it? And what kind of reason can there be other than something that is a realization about the fundamental nature of reality that is shared among us? And so this is really hard to track now. People out there will say that they've had experiences of the divine and of oneness, and we certainly know that cognitive science, now neuroscience, has measured people's brains in these states, and Buddhist monks, as Vervaeke showed us in earlier episodes. We can measure the brain when it's in a higher state. We can recognize these high processing, increased processing of parallel processing that is occurring. and recognize this as an optimal state that humans can be in. We could recognize the value of spiritual, what would you say, like rituals, the value of ritual and the value of self-transcendence, of self-actualization.
Maybe we need to become more playful.
So it's
Ritual is a
part
form
of
of
it.
play. We forgot how to play.
Yeah.
The only
Engage
we
in
don't
more
play no
serious
more.
play.
Yeah,
which
serious
is not
play.
an unfun play.
No,
It's just much more, there's more commitment and the development of virtuosity that's involved. So, you do serious play when you're being a ballerina or you're being a musician or basketball player or whatever it is.
well, you've got
But
the
there's a lot of talent and work that goes into that, but it's fun.
you got the
fun work.
The
Yeah.
community. The community is individuals all coming together, and then you've got the ritual, which is serious play, and that leads to a transcendent experience, and that gives you the gnosis.
We need to spread the gnosis. That's one thing that's very important right
Well, we need to spread beneficial gnoses
now.
because there are non-beneficial gnosises that have turned into weird cults that have led
Right,
to
yeah,
the
people have
worst
tried
things
this.
you could ever
And it's so we really do need to
see. James
understand
Lindsay for that
the-
because
our past, really, and the current breakthroughs in modern science to see what is the way that we marry these worlds. How do we help thread and bring these different
because both of
ancient
them are
traditions
real.
and wisdom
It's not-
traditions into
yeah.
coordination and conversation, and then start threading together and working together more. They've been interworking together for a long time, many of them.
Well,
There's insights that you can see shared across the ancient mystery schools, like the
yeah.
non-dualistic
Well,
wisdom that's there.
realizing that both this world and that world are both each real, like what we talked about last episode. They're both real. It's not one is more real than the other. Sometimes one feels more real than the other, but they're both real.
Like we're saying at the
They are
beginning,
one world.
we can be rational and logical in our approach to understanding reality and our relationship with it, how we may operate with it. We can get better and better at measuring, but we can also maintain a sense of reverence for the great mystery that will always be beyond us. There's always going to be an infinite amount of more information for us to be able to gain from one seed to one new galaxy. We'll never finish this process of enlightenment, of realization, of coming into the real. We're just going to get realer and realer and realer. It's kind of what reality does.
Hopefully.
And
be hopeful.
it's more surreal and supernatural and super real at the same time. It's, I guess we have to help remarry the sacred, spirituality, and science. And that happens within ourselves and how we approach reality. It happens in what we help instantiate in our communities. And we kind of just ratchet it up from there. It's the hope.
Well, as proof, we no longer live in a world where we think the planets go like this at us. Now we realize, we all go around like this, and it looks like this when you have orbits that do this. And then we realize, actually, we go around like this.
Yes, exactly what's happening. Yeah, it's not just like a sun and an Earth on a flat plane.
Oh,
it's
no,
actually
it's
a sun
corkscrew.
and an Earth, and the sun is going through space.
And it
It's
looks like DNA.
spiraling through space as it turns through the Milky Way galaxy. And the Milky Way galaxy is turning around in its family of stars, groups. I forget what that group is called within our
Clusters
larger
upon
Milky Way.
clusters
The
upon
clusters,
clusters. Yeah.
this cluster of the galaxy. And there's more galaxies than there are stars in any one galaxy. And within any one galaxy, there's hundreds of billions of stars. 200 to 300 billion in ours, I think, somewhere around there. And a billion is a million, or what is that? 1,000 millions. You can actually compress a stack of 1 million $1 bills in a vise, and it'll be about 13 inches. But if you compress a billion $1 bills in a vise, it will be as high as the Washington Monument. That gives you an idea of the difference just between a billion and a million. A billion's a lot. And we have trillions of galaxies out there.
Yeah, but
Thousands of billions of
the
galaxies.
difference between 1 and a billionth is so small that we might be able to measure it, but it's so small that we have a real hard time measuring that.
What does nano represent in size on nanoscale?
I don't know. Okay.
That's like hair size, I think.
Well,
Micro is
what
millionth
it?
or
10
thousandth.
or no, 1, 10, 100,000, 10,000, 100,000. How many zeros is that? It keeps going. That's why they do the exponential stuff. You know, put an exponent on it because it's like too many zeros. Wonderful things. So we have this math language now that brings us back to, you can have your illusions and your fantasies, but the math begs to differ. So we now have this very tangible psychotechnology that we can
It's
use.
so powerful that we were able to look at this chaotic, because we started to realize, oh my gosh, the cosmos are chaotic and really hard to understand. Then math helped us put order into it, and then we put so much weight on the insight that we gained through this new psychotechnology, so much weight on the logic that it started to supersede love.
Yeah,
and
so
wisdom.
I have a note
and
here.
The fellowship on the behalf of wisdom that we used to engage in together.
So I have a note here. So math is the space that's in the chasm between the mind and your experience. You think one thing, you experience another. Math tells you which one is the more accurate of the two. But you can't just, you can't like, yet again, we're at one of these trinities. You can't substitute any corner of any triangle of trinities, for the other. You have to have all of them, because if you do, then it ends up dukkha.
Yeah.
A lopsided wheel destroying itself.
Wheel that's out of kilter. Yeah.
So we experience this chasm between things, and then we manifested a psychotechnology to fill that chasm.
Right.
And we've done this before for other chasms between the world that we think is real and the real world. And then we have a wisdom, the virtues that build up to wisdom to fill that chasm the first time we did it. And then the next time we did it, we used those psychotechnologies to then exact.
We have a way of hyper fixating on the new thing that is helping us get past the most recent
Well, sure, that's
major step that we had to get through, and that makes sense.
You ever seen a baby look at a new thing? They go,
yeah,
and then they put it in their
'Cause
mouth,
we're
which
still
is the
that.
dominant sensory
We're still
organ.
that.
Yeah.
Learning how to be in a universe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're recognizing, okay, well, we got to just kind of learn to juggle, to play in this both and territory.
Both and sometimes the other.
Yeah.
Do you have any more on this section?
No.
Okay,
We
cool.
pretty much went from conformity with the world, like we were saying, to a barrier between us and the world, and sense experience became that veil.
And then figuring out how to put something in that veil, and that's our
and
math.
so we really, so we started to utilize math, which rapidly upgraded us.
Yeah.
And it created its own, of course, slew of new problems.
New downloadable content.
Yeah. New downloadable content, atom bombs, satellites, all of it.
Well, we're not quite there yet. Let's get on time. We'll get there.
All right, guys, we're going to jump back in now.
Remember, we had the theory that we were in touch with the world, we're in conformity with the world. That's gone. Now, what's happened is the following. Here's the world out here, and here's our mind, and in between is this barrier. Experience. Your sense experience isn't you being in touch with the world. Notice I'm using a sense term. It's not putting me in touch with the world. It's actually a veil between me and the world. The only thing that cuts through all of this illusion is this very narrow channel of math. Everything else is illusion. All of a sudden, you are mostly out of touch with the world. This is terrifying. It's terrifying. So you've got all this chaos going on around you, and then you've got this view that suddenly says to you, well, how do you know this isn't an illusion? How do you know that this table is here? How do you know that your mother actually loved you? You really have to go back. You see, we're protected. We're protected by our loss of participatory knowing and perspectival knowing. We assert merrily in our minds the proposition, yes, the earth is not at the center, blah, blah, blah. But we don't actually translate that existentially into what does that mean perspectively? What does that mean about your participation in reality? Put yourself back into what it would be happening for you to just learn this for the first time. And you can see the terror. We're becoming radically disconnected from the world. You can see the influence of Occam here. We're trapped behind. Our experience is now just something that we're talking about, but it's not what really is the case. Now, Galileo comes along and says, but I've got an answer to Occam. This is what Copernicus is showing, and this is what this new scientific way, where I put Aristotelian logic and I put the new math together and I put careful observation together. What it's telling me is that the math, spoken language and sense experience, can't trust those. But the mathematics is the language of the universe. He's very influenced by that old Platonic view about abstract mathematical things being what's real. Now, what Galileo does is he starts to put that new way of thinking about math, that new way of observing, that new way of reasoning into practice. He does something really unusual. So, of course, math up until that time had been, and still primarily was, understood via geometry. So the quintessential math text is Euclid's Elements, right? Math and geometry are pretty much synonymous. Now there's arithmetic and calculation. We already talked about those new mathematical tools. But Galileo does something really, really interesting. He starts using the geometry in a completely abstract fashion. Because look, my sense experiences can't be trusted, right? The way I'm thinking of things doesn't have to in any way look like what it's representing. There doesn't have to be any no experiential similarity between my thoughts and the world. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a triangle. I'm going to use geometry. And he's using it to represent the relationship between, distance and time. And that gives me speed. Now, there's nothing triangular about speed. He's using the geometry to represent abstract mathematical relations. These have nothing to do with how I'm actually experiencing the world. There's no conformity between this and the way the world is in my experience. So he starts to use math in a purely abstract, symbolic way. So he starts to observe things, like he sees a chandelier swinging in a church, and he measures it by tracking with his pulse. He's rolling balls down inclined planes. And what comes out of all of this? Well, Galileo kills the universe. Because what Galileo realizes is inertial motion. Things don't move because there's an inner drive and they're trying to get where they belong. That's a purposeful, narrative way of understanding the world. Things don't move for that reason. Things move because they've been hit by a purely random, arbitrary external force. And they will continue moving like that until another random external force. Before Galileo, everything is alive. Everything is driving, trying to get where it belongs, to make the universe a more beautiful, ordered place. After Galileo, everything is dead. There's no inner life to matter. Nothing is moving on purpose at all. Now that is really important, because before Galileo, you were like everything else, because you act on purpose, and so does everything else. When Galileo kills the universe, you're now a little island of purpose in a vast desert of purposelessness. You're alone. You're an ontological castaway, all by yourself. You're weird and strange and you don't belong. And the universe is an indifferent machine. Notice what this does. Look at this. And we talk about it. And again, pay attention to the words you're using. Oh, yes, inertial motion. What's at the heart of inertia? Inert. Inert. Dead. Lifeless. Not capable of moving itself. And what happens is Galileo starts to understand matter differently. In the old world, old worldview, matter was the potential for information. But now, matter goes to being that which resists. Matter resists my will. It's defined in terms of my resistance. Why is that so important? Why do I want matter to be inert and resisting me? Look, it's actually a beneficial thing if the world is resisting me, because what everybody is telling me is, it's all chaos, and I'm deceiving myself. I'm creating all these illusions. The only hope I have is if the world pushes back on me, if the world resists my will. Everything is defined in terms of will and the resistance to will. So now what you have is you have this lifeless universe and a battle between isolated wills, largely creating illusions, and this vast, inert, willless, but nevertheless resistant machinery of the universe. It has another function. By making matter an actual substance rather than the potential for information, Galileo removes there being any basis for evil. Before, we had a cosmological explanation for evil. Evil was a whole in being, a pure potential, pure chaos. There is no such thing now. Matter is just this resistant, inert stuff. Which means we've lost something, and it's telling to us we don't really have a way, really, of talking about evil. We don't have a metaphysics of what evil is. We think of evil as just excessive immorality. But what is evil? Well, people used to have a very coherent and sophisticated answer to that. Now they either say, well, ultimately there is no such thing, or I don't know, or it's just a way of talking about great immorality. Now Galileo gives us the scientific method. Notice how it's a legacy from the axial revolution. The scientific method is a way for overcoming our willful generation of illusion and self-deception. The whole point of the scientific method is to get the resistance of the world, the inert, purposeless world, to resist our purposes and our will, to show us how we are deceiving ourselves. Now that means that you're going to give huge priority to the scientific method and to the math. So what Galileo is going to say is, look, the mathematical properties are the real properties of the thing. The length of this, right, and its mass, anything that I can measure mathematically about this is going to be real. It's going to be, right, in the object, as we will come to say. It's going to be objective. The mathematical properties are objective. Those are real. So where are all these other properties? What about all the things I can't measure mathematically? What about how sweet the honey is? How beautiful the sunset is? How meaningful these words are? Where's all that meaning? Where's all that meaning? Well, that's non-mathematical, so it's not in the world. It must be inside that mind. Remember, we've developed the mind as this internal chamber that manipulates language and propositions. Inside there, trapped inside your mind, that's where all the meaning is. That's where all the value is. That's where all the beauty is. All of that non-mathematical stuff, that's subjective. It's only in the mind. You experience the illusion of it being in the world. The world is not meaningful. The world is not purposeful. The world is not filled with beauty. The world is not filled with truth. The world is not filled with goodness. The world is not even filled with chairs, cups, tables, because those are not mathematical entities. Those are all illusions created by your meaning-making mind in its willful self-deception, the way it asserts itself on the world. Notice what's happening. The orders are breaking down. See, one of the great strengths of the Aristotelian worldview was that your view of knowledge and your view of the world mutually supported each other. But the great weakness of that, of a worldview, is as one starts to unravel, so does the other. And the unraveling accelerates. As the Aristotelian world breaks down, the Aristotelian theory of knowing breaks down. And as that breaks down, the Aristotelian model of the world, and this starts to spin very fast in an accelerating fashion. Notice where we are already. We're disconnected from the world. We're trapped inside our heads. We've lost perspectival and participatory knowing, self-transcendence. All the meaning, all the beauty, all that was out in the world, that's all gone. It's all trapped inside of our heads. All that's out there is a purposeless, inert, chaotic absurdity. And all that's here within me is inner conflict and a battle of wills with other human beings. It's no wonder that many people were experiencing this as a trauma. Now here's the thing. None of us are immune to this trauma. We just don't think about it anymore. Or what we do is we'll wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, laying on our bed, and think these thoughts, and realize how disconnected we are from reality, how we believe in a scientific worldview in which our meaning and purpose are self, and the objects we interact with, the tables and chairs and cars, and everything of that ilk is all ultimately not real. And all the purposes we're striving for are not real. All the meaning we're making is not real. And then fundamentally, I'm not real. You're not real. I mean, do you ever awake at 3 and think, I'm just a very complex pattern of atoms? That's all that's really there? Everything else is just an illusion? And everything that I'm doing for things that aren't real for a self that isn't real. in a universe that doesn't give a damn about me, is completely indifferent. It's not that it hates me, it's completely inert and indifferent to me. So, as you can imagine, this is not going to leave religion and the spiritual life untouched. There are individuals who are going to be affected by Occam and the Rhineland mystics and the rise of the new science, and are going to try and reconfigure Christianity to deal with this crisis that is emerging. And so, as the scientific revolution is picking up steam, as the commercial and corporate revolutions are picking up steam, as the secularization of the state is picking up steam, the Protestant Reformation occurs. Of course, it occurs in Germany, because that's where everything is occurring. It's going to keep occurring. So what I want to investigate with you next time is the Protestant Reformation and how it furthers the dissolution of the nomological order, the normative order, and the narrative order. Notice how they're already all under significant stress. This new scientific worldview, the nomological order, is one that I don't fit into. The normative order of ascent and self-transcendence, that's gone. The narrative order of there being a story and a life and a purpose to things, that's gone. Luther's going to come and he's going to bring about a Protestant Reformation that is going to exacerbate this collapse of the axes of meaning and the ways in which we are connected to ourselves, each other, and the world. We'll take a look at that next time we're together. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Rough.
Yeah, that one hit me in the feels there towards the end. Oh boy.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, what are we doing? What are we doing?
Yeah.
But before we get into that, so
I was telling
Galileo,
you.
math is the language of the universe. This idea that we have, and even if you're not like a math geek or a universe geek or whatever, you've probably heard this idea that math is the universal language, the language of the universe. That's why, those golden discs we sent out into space for the aliens to find, we did them in such a way that's just basic math.
As basic as we could possibly make it so that they could hopefully break it down. Maybe
one
two
nucleus,
things.
one electron. That's hydrogen. We call that one, and then everything else is based off of that.
Yeah.
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 I really like this because, like, I tend to do thinking like this, and when I'm reasoning things out. So, like, the relationship between time, time, speed, time and space, and moving through time and space is speed. It doesn't make a triangle, but you can abstract it onto a triangle and then measure said abstraction.
So we went from geometry representing
an
the
actual
interaction of
thing,
shapes
and now it's representing an abstract thing.
That triangle can represent how speed occurs between the relation of
speed may not be triangular, but it's definitely a hypotenuse. Oh, because time, space, speed.
Yeah.
Hypotenuse. Bad math jokes. I try.
So we got the use of geometry to represent abstract relations. Math is being used in a purely abstract way. And Galileo comes along and kills the universe. That would be an interesting show or movie. Gal kills the universe.
Kills the definite shape of the universe as we would have it, and introduced
our relation with it. All right, very much.
Yeah, and perhaps introduce this idea of, and as reasoning beings, we don't necessarily like abstraction because it changes things. It makes things chaotic. So it's like, okay, well, I can make a theory of the universe that's a triangle. So the entire universe is a triangle. And then it's like, what the hell do you mean? And then, well, time, space,
His
speed,
use of math to prove astronomical realities was very impactful. He proved that things don't move because of an inner drive.
Yeah, that inner spirit, that inner purpose.
But
No,
before,
it's random. It's random. It's
before
random.
everything was alive and involved, is part of the co-creation, is part of all of creation. The whole universe was alive, every cell. Afterwards, nothing is moving on purpose at all. It's all because of cause and effect.
And it's all because of
this
random.
realization
So, it just
leveled humanity because it changed our whole relation with reality. And this is a situation where it can still be a both and. There can still be some fundamental self-moving universe behind all of this. There can still be a God force behind all of this.
Well, there was probably a lot of
We
people,
can hold both at the
but
same
they
time.
felt like there were the islands. They're an idealistic island.
Yeah.
Of like, look, there's still this primary mover that gives a purpose to everything. But
This stuff was so powerful that it could actually concretely explain the movements of the stars. It could help us build new technology that was amazing. We were able to verify and do things we could never do before. And so it's a very powerful proof of an alternative understanding of reality.
it took the mysticism out.
It really sucked the mysticism out of the universe for us.
Yeah, like out of God, and like
we'd already removed self-transcendence from the spiritual process, from religious activity, and from the religious life. So now this happens,
well,
the religion started to lose its juice.
and he brought up the idea of now, like, within this like mindset that's taking over, and it's not just Galileo, but it's becoming common. If you have a purpose-driven life and other things, now there's this this alienation within your own universe happening. You are this island. You are separate. You are different from
before everything had purpose. Now we are alone in this strange, incomprehensible, absurd, infinitely reaching, meaningless, purposeless universe.
Annihilation is the word I think he used.
Inert.
Annihilation of the self in the universe.
Yes. Yeah, because now the universe is inert. It's lifeless.
Yeah.
It's incapable of being self-moving like we are. So now we have this understanding that matter resists our will. This is our only way to be able to map onto this new understanding of reality.
Well, even
everything's defined in terms of resistance.
Well, sure.
Right.
Weight. When you say somebody weighs, something weighs 20 kilos or 100 pounds. I know they're not equivalent. I don't do that. I'm American. You're lucky I said kilos. But either way, it's what is what gravity, is pulling down. So your spring resists the gravity pulling down. That calibrated resistance you call 30 kilos, 100 pounds, less than 100 pounds, sorry. So it's resistance, like measurement is resistance. And so like air pressure, how much weight can it push against? PSI, pounds per square inch. It's pounds of resistance per square inch of surface area. So that resistance, like I giggled to myself when this came up. I was like, it's right. And now your will and what resists your will.
Yes.
And then even like, valuing systems, like have developed through this. And how do you measure the worth of something that is non-mathematic and intangible? I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but like, that's like really sticks out. It's like, because you can measure how much something weighs, how much pressure something has, how long it's going to take to get somewhere, how gravity bodies pull against each other. But like, while we're listening, it's like, how do you measure the beauty of something? So when you have like a beauty contest or,
how can you measure the recognitions and the reality of self-aware um, free-willed beings
Mm-hmm.
that can recognize things such as beauty and express things truthfully and honestly or with virtuosity in their movement and their activity and their language. How do you explain? Yeah, you can't measure that stuff, but you can. But you can to some degree, but it's all like a subjective interpretation of how well this affected reality over this term of time, and it was
Well, that's
good this
probably
way
where
and that
you need
way.
to get an aggregate of people and use like like the weird statistic thing that happens with lots and lots of people where it all kind of neutralizes out into a
Yeah,
more accurate
everyone
view.
gives back their like reading of how well their day went or this moment was, and but
So
it's all subjective stuff at this point. So it's how do you measure subjectivity?
yeah, so this objective universe we have created with these mathematics that we have leaves no room for evil, because if there is no driver spirit underneath things, and then the absence of that, there really is no evil. It's just this
That's where we are.
dead universe moving through itself. Or
Yeah,
like, so you can't say that the black hole is evil because it sucks up stars.
yeah.
So like now we are losing.
Yeah, we moved our understanding, our basis for understanding of what evil is. In
Yeah.
life, where we do recognize, though, life has become a battle of so many individual wills competing in a purposeless universe.
Yeah.
That's quite disorienting. And then we removed the idea of evil, and all we're left with is this concept of great immorality or something. But before, evil was seen as a whole in being. It was like pure chaos.
So yeah, so I got a note here for that, and I know what this note means. It's like, so this will versus resistance leaves no room for evil because matter is no longer potential. What matters is no longer potential,
yeah.
but what resists. So
Oh, yeah,
matter
yeah,
is the thing that resists. It resists the pushing.
Yep.
So it went from what what matters is the potential of it. Now the matter or what matters is the resistance.
Yeah, yeah.
And the resistance has no room for evil. And
Because you can measure the resistance. How can you measure the potential? Is very hard to measure in some cases. So it's a lot easier.
well, and if you get on to more
Is that right? I don't know if that's right.
modern ends of activism and such, it's about resistance.
That's true.
And we all know throughout history and time the ones that carry the picket signs and run around and don't check themselves.
Yeah.
What matters to them is the resistance, and they have no room for evil, so they don't see it
They don't
as
believe-
they're
they don't-
becoming it.
Yeah, as they're becoming it. They don't
The
even
French
recognize
Revolution,
the danger of
or
the very real reality
yes.
of evil in this universe.
Yeah.
When one is not totally present and in their natural
what matters
highest potential being mode that we have access to as humans, you're in your needing having mode instead, a survival alone orientation. You're not in the optimal mode of being that the human is capable of, in a loving, wise state of mind.
So maybe we should hold
Most
on
definitely,
to
yeah.
what matters is the potential. There's a potential for a lot happening, opposed to the resistance. Because if what
Yeah.
matters most to you is what
No
the
doubt, yeah.
resistance, then you have no room for the understanding of evil.
Right,
There's
yeah.
no room for that. And
Yeah, there's a-
evil is real. I'm sorry, we see it.
Evil
You
is
see
real.
it more and more.
Yeah, and resisting evil, which is the typical when people point something out. They say it's if you're saying something's bad, then you're recognizing the reality of evil and wrongness in the world, and you're saying there is a transcendent, there's a higher ideal of a way of being that we can hold ourselves accountable towards. We recognize an old adage in our culture that what you resist persists, and it's because we learned a long time ago, over and over and over again now throughout history, that pushing against something is just going to cause it to push back with equal motion and force. It's
What
just
resists
cause and
persists.
effect. What resists
yeah.
persists. You're going to get an equal and opposite reaction. And if you amp up, it's going to amp up back, and that's how that works. Bucky Fuller broke it down to us very succinctly when he said that you don't make the existence, you don't overcome an existing system by resisting it. You create a new system that makes the existing one obsolete.
And
So, alongside the current system parallel to it, you create something that is better, that works better, and people come over and join it because it's just better and it makes the existing one obsolete.
yeah,
That is the safest way to have a revolution.
yeah.
If we
So
can pull that off right now and this time in history, that would be something special.
it'd be
You know,
something.
it'd be a hat trick. I mean, it's
It
doing
wouldn't be nothing.
it wouldn't be nothing. It would be something huge and difficult to pull off, but it can be done.
So yeah,
I believe it
Galileo
can be done.
introduces us to our second definition of objective, not the object, the things interacting, but an outside objective looking in on the inert, dead components of the universe. Kind of
Yes.
objective. Because we
Yes.
were introduced to that word objective before in the sense of like, look at something objectively, like, like sex. It's skin rubbing together to produce a response that makes us think like they're objects doing a thing, opposed to objective, well, let me look at things from a third person perspective, like all the planets and the stars and the galaxy. That's what we usually mean by objective, opposed to let me look at just the gross in both ways, gross or gross as in whole. And so now
Objective, it's in the object. Everything that you need to prove its existence can be measured.
yeah,
It can be proven.
and you can
This
step
thing can be
outside of
measured,
that
so
and
it's-
measure
yeah.
it. Yeah,
Yeah. So that to to be objective is to be able to measure rationally without subjective input.
yeah. Which is in the mind.
Yeah. So
You
we saw
know.
this movement from the legacy of the axial realizations to a recelebration of the scientific revolution, or the invent of the scientific revolution. Really, at this point, you could say the advent of the r- real current modern phase of it. Um, and we recognized the Aristotelian worldview approach to problem solving was a way to overcome our disillusion. That's what I'm trying to say. To use our understanding of the world to understand the world, to understand ourselves. We're trying to understand ourselves by now understanding the world outside of us.
Yeah,
Instead of going internally, we're breaking down everything
Yeah.
on the outside.
yeah. So it's like
So
you're
it's transfer of energy to scientism rather than spiritualism, and a sacred relation with reality.
yeah. So you're trapped inside your own head, and then there's
Yep.
everyone and everything else, and then it's a battle of wills between you and that.
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
yeah.
Um,
Where is meaning? It's not in the world. It must be in our
It's-
minds.
It's in the mind. It's the subjective. So the world is the object,
The whole
and
world
the
is all
meaning
can be
is the
objectively
subject.
explained and broken down into its constituent parts. Then yeah, all the meaning, the beauty,
Mm-hmm.
and everything isn't out there in the world. It's internal. This revolution levels us again. So all the old worldviews and the orders are breaking down. The Aristotelian world breaks down. Reality breaks down. That understanding of reality. And we experience increased disconnection. We tried to apply that rationalism the reason that we had employed so usefully before. Again, this time it really
Mhm.
caused us to crash because we were doing it without doing so with sacred practice in tandem,
Well,
like we had before.
and perhaps there was, but like there's
Right.
there's
In some cases,
there,
sure.
there's a real sour spot you can get when you realize, like, say, this world is indifferent to you. If it was malicious towards you, that's one thing, but like being indifferent
Indifferent, man. That
is
feels
that's a totally different
so
breakdown.
hopeless, doesn't
you
it?
know?
Yeah. So we lost the perspectival relation with reality of being part of this whole world moving together, co-creating with the divine. We lost that. The participatory nature of that co-creation. We lost the self-transcendence aspect of spirituality as the way to improve our wisdom and to become better people and to live more harmoniously together. All that is out there now, like you said, it's just absurdity and chaos.
Particularly
Ongoing plot, conflict, a battle of wills.
yeah, and in this day and age too, it's like we're at a period of time, and I think we're like cresting beyond it, because I'm seeing some markers, but It was make things as chaotic as possible, mince up all the words, mince up all the meanings of things, spin it all together, you know, create arbitrary groups and barriers that end up breaking down within themselves. And now we're like, I feel like we're kind of cresting out of that, but it does make sense though. It's like, you know, as a species, if we're specially learning these realizations, you do have to go through like building realizations and then destructive realizations and then exacting what worked both in the building and the destruction within the next layer, but still doing a building and destructing as well. So it's like, you know, what end of the curve are we on? And well,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, because we're always in this process of framing and then reframing, destroying the previous frames because they weren't totally
it
exact.
may look like this, but it might actually be this.
Yeah,
We
spiral.
don't know. So
Yeah.
it's like there might be a new psychotechnology like in this day and age that we may come to develop to be able to realize the planets don't go like this around us, but there's something else that
Oh yeah,
moves
check out
everything.
Vervaeke's new wisdom series because he's teaching dialogos, and you see him and some of his friends go through the process step by step by step. It's really cool. I'll have to share this one with you. It's got was Guy Sinstock in this one? Christopher Mastropietro and others were in the room with him. But
Guy sense that?
regardless, dialogos is a way for humans to be able to converse together in such a way as to achieve a mind together, to become a vehicle together in the moment, their wisdom, their understanding, all their expertise, if they're able to be how would you say this, free enough of attachment to their egoic sense of self.
More concerned about what they're doing,
Deep
opposed
in the
to
being mode.
Yeah,
Deep in the being mode, there's a process of dialogue where something akin to, or the logos itself, comes alive, and it's more than the number of individuals together. It's a higher level of gnosis and understanding and intellectualization.
yeah. So what I've seen
that can be utilized, and this, we used to use this in the ancient Greek times. This was what was brought about through people like Plato and Socrates.
Yeah, instead of being like an antagonistic relationship with like a battle of wills, if you will, it's more of like
it's more of
somebody makes a postulation, the other person picks up on that, runs it through their courses, and then the other person sees what they ran it through,
something like that,
picks it up, and then it all comes.
Yeah, but it's even more. It's interesting because everyone, there's different roles, and then the roles are switching each round of it too. So there's one person that's just kind of cataloging what's happening. There's another person that's like, let me see if I can repeat the proposition that the speaker just made in another way, but as clearly as possible. In my own words, and does that make sense? Am I understanding your proposition now?
Precisely.
And then you go into like there's different roles.
If I am getting it right,
involved.
then here's the thought experiment, if you will, that we're doing. Let me and then continue it, and then somebody else can take.
Exactly.
Okay, do I understand this properly? Okay. Well, in that case, if we're doing this,
then they become the
then
speaker.
This, and then it moves. Yeah.
Now,
so I've seen it in action. Not super familiar with the steps, but it's an interesting
cool.
mode of figuring things.
And I think that we can. If we start getting experts in the rooms together, different fields perhaps, and start tackling some of the greatest challenges that humanity currently
Let's
faces.
do it
We might
in
be
the
able to
coffee
solve
shops.
things
Let's figure out how to
at
do it.
an accelerated rate that we need right now. Because we do need more than one mind together to solve the greatest problems that we face in our modern age.
We need a distributive cognitive network. Or
distributed or distributive cognitive networks.
I'm putting the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Now, we already have that to some degree, but the dialogus is the active, conscious use of that in a moment with other individuals, and it's a beautiful thing to witness. It's quite unique, and as DJ was saying, it's not debate to figure out who's right. It's actually
to figure out if that idea
cooperation
works.
To find out the truth together.
Yeah.
And so you're coming from an objective viewpoint. You know, you're trying to figure out the truth. You're letting go of your attachment to your beliefs, where really our goal here is together find out the truth ultimately. And
it's the dancing Wooly Masters Everybody dances around and points at the thing that you can't quite make a name to.
Mm-hmm.
But if we all dance around it and point at it long enough, we come to an
Yeah, at
understanding
least get a sense of the
close
direction.
enough
Yeah.
that we can all agree that, okay, it's there.
That's what any good teacher does, whether it's a preacher at your church, it's Buddhist yoga, it's Advaita Vedanta, or
A
any
random
other
guy at the coffee shop,
stoicism or anything else.
the homeless guy in the corner of the street that has something to say on that random day that is lucid. You never know.
The best that one can do to teach us is to, when we're talking about the ineffable, is to, since you can't name it, you can only point to it. It's an infinite thing, and it's ultimately, like we were saying in the beginning of this episode, the closer you get, the more information and energy is being outputted. What you can do is, like you were saying, dance around this thing, beat around the bush to get an idea of where the bush is, and that is basically how you can also instruct how to meditate, how to look within.
Sure.
You can't say exactly what it is when you're saying turn awareness in upon itself, but the idea of becoming aware of the actual moment without interpretation or description or judgment of it, but rather noticing one's description and judgment and ideas about what's happening in the moment.
And sometimes
that is how you dance around saying what meditation is.
If you're humble enough to express those judgments and things yourself, and then also try to really understand other people's judgments they have, then it also makes it even more whole, because then you see where is this systematic error that we're all having?
Yes, right.
So it's not just what's good that's happening. It's also where's this systematic error, like the kids with the candies. If you put out the 5 candies, the candies that are spread out longer, the kid's going to take because it looks bigger. And all kids will do this, and you realize, oh, kids don't understand, and it's 5 candies. They're just like, bigger space, more candy. But the same thing goes with, as like, even like if you have an opinion and a bias, express it, because if you're humble enough to express it and then listen to other people express their biases and opinions, then you can start to see a systemic trend.
Yeah.
Like as in the system of understanding and cognitive realization that we all have, and then you can address that.
Yeah. If we start recognizing that we all are in this one world, this universe here together, and we have to figure out how to manage ourselves, how to steer ourselves through this cosmos together, through this life, in this world, we can take this less divisive mode of operation with one another. We can recognize, wait, we're not so separate as we seem to think. We're also totally interrelated.
And if we are quite separate, that's a good thing too, because it allows us to have other ends of understanding.
Of course, we're separate.
So
in
the
that
separate and together are both good.
No.
It's both good.
It's
It's
good
all
that we
good.
have our individualized perspectives, our own unique individual awarenesses, but we're all also part of this one giant thing that's happening together.
I understand the stoners now.
So
it's
now
all good, bruh.
We're embracing the paradox, this both and mode, and from here we might be able to do something. We might be able to help popularize dialogos instead of just debate. We can shift from worrying so much about being right, like I'm right, I got to get my idea across to you, me and my people are right, to I could be wrong. Any of us could be wrong. Let's try and figure this out together.
Well, even beyond that,
let's all put our energy together and just start from zero and figure it out.
It's not that I'm right. It's this idea that might work is right, whether it's mine or anybody else's.
Yeah.
So let's work this through to find the best. The best is right. The best is right,
let's
whether
find
it comes
out
from you or me or anybody else. The best is right.
Yeah.
So what we'll do is like, okay, so this is what you're talking about. Is that accurate enough? Oh, okay. So let me expand upon that, and then you ask me, so is this what you meant? No, I actually kind of meant this. And you'd be like, okay, so this is what you meant? Yes. Okay. And then you expand upon it, and then you can work out whether an idea or something really works than just
we understand where
the
each other's
battle of
value
wills.
orientations are coming from. We understand each other's reasoning, why we're thinking the way we are, what we're seeing in the world. And then we can see from each other's points of view. Now we've got a wider perspective, total perspective of awareness. We've upgraded our own awareness in tandem with somebody else now that we can look together. We've got a wider aperture. It's deeper. It's more considerate. You keep widening that. You keep adding people to that. Yeah, that's what we can do. That's an approach, and that can be a new psychotechnology. I can see that becoming a part of human culture as a shift from just because we got to recognize we're in an emergency mode here, guys. We got to get past like the pointless ongoing debates and othering and blaming the other over and over and over again. We got to get into a
And all the
composure, yeah, into a
nonsense.
posture of not opposing each other, but let's get side by side. We got to figure this thing out together. How are we doing this thing? How are we doing this? What's happening? What are you seeing that's wrong? Okay, here's what I'm seeing that what's wrong. Well, why do you feel that that's wrong? There's the value orientation. Now we understand how we're orienting, how we're coming to where we are, and now we can position ourselves side by side even more effectively to look at the problem at hand together. We can get more eyes on this problem together, more hands to work on the solution.
That's a key word is value. Like this is a personal opinion, but I think personally, at least in my local area, United States, Eastern, East Coast, and I'm sure it's on the West Coast and in the middle too. But this value, like, oh, what's it worth? Why bother? There's that aspect to it, and then there's the other end of it where it's like, no, it's so important. Okay, but what is it? So there's those that are like, yes, there's a lot of value, but what is it that you have value in? And then there's the other end is like, what is this value thing you talk about?
Yeah.
And it's just this weird, like, it's like lukewarm soup.
Yeah, right.
It's just weird. I don't know what to make of it yet. I'm still working on it, but it's interesting. That's why I think it's important. Like what we're doing right now is kind of like a fractured form of dialogos, where we're watching this lecture, we're taking notes, we're trying to, we're clarifying it between us, as the show builds and other things happen, we'll have more interactions with people. I talk with people in my own hometown about things like this and have the interaction, but that's kind of what we're doing in a I don't want to say depersonalized, but depersonalized in the sense of like, we don't have 5 people directly in the same room doing this. So we're just kind of bastardizing in the best way the techniques to make the most effect in our life and our surrounding community as well.
Yeah, I see the dialogos come out a little bit here and there when we ourselves are getting at the very edge of our understanding. We're trying to see how does this apply to our world today, and we start coming to new ideas. In those moments where things just start to happen and like a kind of a new idea comes up together, that's the shade of dialogos that we're sensing, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a great boon that we have access to it. It's basically an innate human capacity that we forgot that we have. We've been using something like this intuitive capacity for knowing together our environment since our fucking hunting gatherer days, of course, right? When we learned to hunt together as groups, and you just look at the instincts of a wolf pack, how well they can get to read each other's body language and know how to hunt together by surrounding something, and they're ingenious. Humans were whole levels beyond wolf packs, and we've utilized all of that. We've exapted all of that and brought it into our language and conversation capacity. All of that intuitive knowing from body language and understanding each other's movements and emotion and emotionality.
We do this weird dialogos thing also when we're children, when we're creating
very much when you're doing serious
play or like
house
creating tall tales with each other, where you're starting to do that, and they'll be like, oh yeah, and then like this like big guy came out, the big guy, and he had like
that's when
like
you let the logos take over,
and just doing it, and it's like, oh yeah, and then we're doing.
Whenever you've had like some of the greatest conversations of your life, or that's the only other ones we can think of. That happens a lot when we're kids. That's a perfect example. That's it. Now as we get older, every once in a while in life, you have these super deep conversations. You're having sleepovers as a 12-year-old, and then one night late as teenagers, like 4 years later, and then you're in your early 20s one night at the apartment. Y'all have this really deep conversation when you figure out something about life.
And then
together
you're like
that changes you
35
all a
drunk
little
at the
bit.
bar late at night with a dude, and you have that conversation that's really freaking deep that sticks with you,
Yeah.
even though you're like shit faced plastered and you don't remember how you got home, but you remember that fucking experience. Yeah, it just happens naturally though. It's
Well, this is how festivals are born, bands
Yeah,
are born, and
yeah.
many inventions have come about. This is probably how Watson and Crick had their double helix, because they attribute it to acid.
Yeah.
The realization the DNA double helix to an actual vision that they set, but it still took talking and working it out together.
Well, perhaps
ultimately.
the real work to be done is figuring out how to be as optimally aware of what we're doing when we're doing it, so we can do it as best as we can, because it hits us like, you know, like getting into the flow of understanding in the universe and all these things hits us in random moments when you're just in the flow, you know. But if you can become aware, that awareness, you know, that we talk about in meditation or flow state exercises or whatever, that being aware of it without the oh wow, but like know what you're doing, then being able to practice and replicate and use these scientific methods to enhance this. And then like I think we're at the point right now where we need to incorporate all of these modes, figure out what doesn't work, which we have a pretty good idea, you know, and then incorporate all the things that do work and integrate them together to exact a new set of psychotechnologies and meta technologies, as in like techniques we use to deal with the broad everything, the meta, together, you know. And I don't know, I think we can do it, and if we don't, well then, I won't be here to see it, so
It's a beautiful, hopeful, and actionable suggestion. Why not? It's actually something.
Yeah, why not? Let's do it.
That is actionable. Something we can do. There's actual steps that we can act on. We can improve ourselves to improve our personal lives, improve our family lives, our communities. We can ratchet that up to improving our nations, and we can improve this world together. We can change this world from the inside out.
And from the outside in,
the name of
the
the game.
time.
Yeah, then you can create a world that can help mold beautiful people, because we've made a beautiful world. We can do the both. We can do the figure eight. We can do the.
It's pretty easy. The world is already beautiful, and the people are already beautiful. So you just got to just keep doing it, you know.
That's it. We can do the dance of the torus. That's the mathematical symbol torus.
3-dimensional donut, bruh.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful sight to see.
Yeah, that it's like a 3D figure. It's like a figure eight, but in 3D. So it's like two donuts that are like, there's a hole in the top and the bottom of each donut, and they're turning inside out into each other.
It's just
like,
a donut.
It's just this one.
Yeah.
It's what a.
And then you can do a Mobius donut, where you take a donut and you cut one part of it and you turn it by 90 degrees, and then you reattach it, and then it just has one face. But it's a donut with one face.
Whoa.
Breaking physics in real life.
Whoa. Breaking physics.
Oh,
Breaking Donuts.
Breaking Donuts.
Follow-up band to Smashing Pumpkins. As far as pointless band names go. I guess Smashing Pumpkins was a thing, though. It was a thing. And that's what they were about.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
we're going to honor that.
At least it wasn't Smashing Watermelons, because then Gallagher would have been out of business, because then his whole shtick would have been gone.
That's true. If the human race hadn't made such a mistake here, if Galileo hadn't killed the universe, we would have never had like jazz, soul, and rock and roll.
Damn you, Galileo, you killed the universe.
It was a natural step in the process of an intelligent species becoming increasingly self-aware, self-reflective, and powerful and impactful on its environment.
The universe was a hamster, and Galileo was a kid that accidentally killed his hamster.
Kind of, right?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. All right, I'll buy that. The universe is a hamster.
His recognition of how he could use math to abstractly measure and depict realities
Well, it brought in the random, like, and really nothing hits harder than just the random accident. Like
Yeah.
somebody
It brought
going,
in the meaninglessness too. There's no meaning or purpose to
sure,
this universe anymore.
like somebody dies in war, well then
Before every
there's valor, and
Yeah.
and then we can deal with it. Somebody dies of old age, well they lived a good life. Somebody dies of suicide, oh well it was a tragic story, but somebody accidentally has like a piece of satellite that falls out of the sky and caves in their skull. What do you do with that? That's completely freaking random. There's no meaning to that.
True.
Like
True.
that's that's dude. Like
Yeah.
that robs us
And if
of
the
all-
world is just beautiful at default, then no matter what kind of life you live, it's like still kind of good because the world is beautiful innately. But now the world isn't beautiful innately. That's just one subjective viewpoint, and that's true. It's both things at once. It's both beautiful and it's our subjective impression from whatever vantage point we're looking at that time.
I think it's
It's always a both and, man.
Even
It's never the either or.
organized is beautiful, random is beautiful. The
Yeah.
chaos in between is beautiful too.
Yeah, you can never have the either or. You can never have the one without the other. You cannot have reality without the interrelating opposites. You cannot have temperature without hot and cold. Can't have light without dark. So on and so
And
forth.
I went to HVAC school. Hot and cold doesn't actually exist. There's just more heat or less heat. And heat is a level of resistance,
Yeah.
by the way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a
yeah.
measuring of energy.
Uh-huh. It all comes back down to resistance. That's how we see the world. Oh no.
What a strange switch we get to do now.
Oh
I mean,
boy.
you see it slowly happening. Like we're waking up to our inherent oneness once again. And the mindfulness revolution is just exploding all over the planet, and we're becoming interested in ancient wisdom again. Because we're trying to figure this thing out. It's like, okay, how do we find some sense of stability in the world now that we have destroyed our previous concepts of God for such large numbers of people?
It's an exciting time to be alive. I can tell you that. It's stressful as hell, but
I mean,
it's super
even the people that
exciting.
believe in God don't believe in God the way that they used to just 1,000 years or 500 years before. It's changed radically.
And there's
It went from being a self-transcendence then to being a be good or else you're going to burn forever
well,
thing.
and I'd venture to argue
It's more
that
about power
there's even people that
than love.
hope there is a God,
Mm-hmm.
whether they believe or not, and then there's people that hope that they believe in God.
Yeah, right.
But like you hear the people be like, well, I go to church and do it right because just in case there's a heaven or hell, I'll be good. And I'm like, oh, you're gonna be doomed to hell if you think it that way. Come on now.
That's how it works, man. There's several moments where Jesus was pretty clear about how
I'm a
he wasn't a
Christian.
fan
I'm
of
a
that.
Christian that doesn't subscribe to the idea of this. If you're bad, you get sent to the flaming pits of hell. I'm more of the individual that believes in you will make it in this life and you will willfully separate yourself from the divine nature of the universe. And that in and of itself is hell.
Yeah, it's already hell. You can make of heaven a hell and of hell a heaven for sure. And humans being able to do that is a very confusing notion.
And heaven
We
is
also
just
forget that there might
continuous.
be an after the fact. There might be a purgatory realm that is quite hellish that one goes through to experience maybe like the mistakes that they're stuck on that they can't quite complete their reintegration with the whole of God and universal reality
Yeah,
yet because they're still attached to their old life kind of thing. So you got
The-
ghosts and suffering and
the people who believe in the
in between
Urantia,
places.
the people who believe in the Urantia book have a word for this. It's the mansion worlds. So what they believe is well, there's a lot they believe, but in this sense, when you die, since something happened and humanity on Earth is no longer able to participate in the galactic cosmos, we have to go to these intermediary worlds, and there's I don't know how many of them. I'm not a Urantiist, so you'll have to forgive me. But the idea is you work on the things that you didn't get right this time around, so it's just a weird, funny version of like reincarnation, whether it's Eastern reincarnation or like Western, as in like the mystic Judaism realm of reincarnation, or the way I believe in reincarnation is like everything that is in the universe is reincarnating as itself to further the infinite.
Right.
Because if you're going to be infinite, you might as well do it right.
That is similar to the Hindu idea that there's one soul
Yeah.
that has infinite aspects to it.
And I won't say soul because also I have a definition of souls. The soul is the thing that connects the flesh, body, and mind to the spirit. So the spirit is the light that shines through the diffracted crystalline lenses that create all the other things. The facets on the crystal are, you call them the souls that give them the unique thing.
There's one light, and it shines
in
a special, unique way.
The
from
soul
each...
is the umbilicus that connects you
There you go.
to the spirit that is not tied specifically to the body. If you want to go that route, that's
the
why
spirit
it's like,
runs through everything.
That's why it's like you don't want to lose your soul because then you go to hell. Yeah, you lose your connection to the ultimate spirit of everything, which is a willful act, in my opinion. And you can see it in the eyes. The eyes become void. There's nothing in there. You can do it through drugs. You can do it through greed. You can do it through sex. You can do it through, anything you want to do, but you can't define it, but you can recognize it when you see it.
Yeah.
And, not to be a pessimist, but I don't know if you can get it back or not. I'd like to think you could. If you could go through trials and tribulations, rebuild that connection to your spirit.
You can. For most people, it seems. Maybe you have some particular psychopaths or sociopaths that are extreme examples,
or even
but
just normal people.
it seems most people, yeah, for sure, that they're actually quite capable of rehabilitation. You can say something that we could do a better job of actually working on in our jails and prisons, actual rehabilitation programs. We have some, and there's certainly some interesting and quite good aspects to meditation teachers and books and things like that are probably good things.
But then there's also the realization.
But a higher focus on rehabilitation, not just housing criminals, I think certainly should be looked at.
Then there's also the argument on that end that we have to deal with is like, there are some people that cannot be saved that are just permanently broken that want to destroy fucking everything. And if you give them the chance, they will.
How to deal with those kinds of
people.
And
how to recognize it. And I don't know if we're wise enough to be able to recognize that. That's why, it's like, I'm like, let's leave things to individuals because I'd rather an individual be wrong than the state be wrong. Because when the state's wrong, millions die. When an individual dies, max is like 20.
Culturally, finding ways to depopularize that kind of behavior is very important for us. But what you do when you encounter one of those individuals is going to have to be location specific, really. I mean, the communities are going to have to figure out how to deal with those kinds of people themselves, as they have for time immemorial. In some cases, there's sometimes you can outcast the person. Other times, you do what some native tribes did, which is different way of going about it.
You don't even got to look that far back. You can look, like 50 years ago. It's like, some people say you come up and killed somebody's fucking kids. The whole town comes, and you're gone. You're gone.
Yeah,
and they take you out.
Yeah,
and it leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. But I do believe individuals working together.
Well, we have to be able to be good. Yeah, you're right.
But we how do we
recognize evil as we become better within ourselves, truly,
and
we can start recognizing it more readily and know how to handle it.
How do we not propagate and foster evil within our own walls, if you will?
Yeah,
because that's the problem is if you've got a healthy, strong society that works with each other, the chances of psychopathic evil becoming very, 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 very evil is
if you have
limited.
Self-destructive people in your society, then your society can become self-destructive. That is what is happening to America
if your
today.
Society is self-destructive, it gives what's the word? It gives affordances to self-destructive behaviors and self-destructive people.
The society not only gives them affordances, it's in a feedback loop. It is society isn't a separate thing from individuals. It is the individuals. So we are society.
It has individuals in it, but I guess
this is Krishnamurti's point on society. You are the world. The world is you.
Yeah, I guess it's if you have each individual strong enough, aware enough, wise enough, virtuous enough to meet with other individuals that have those same virtues. That's, why the strongest societies shared like the same religion, same cultures, and other stuff like that. Also, the societies that tend to ossify and disappear are those societies as well. So it's like the more advanced and better you become, your longevity actually goes down. Crazy enough. But yeah, no, if you want to fight evil and all these things, you can't fight it at the edge of a sword. You can only fight it at the dinner table with your partner and your children.
Yeah.
If you want to fight evil, make a family. If you don't do the traditional family thing, figure out another way to make a family.
Yeah, get on a road of self-improvement of some sort. Become involved in a path of recognizing sacred.
And play
something
with your
sacred
friend.
in life.
Play with your
Yeah.
friends in this game that we're doing. This
Work on behalf of what is
serious
true
play.
and good for one and
Yeah.
all. What are things that protect the individual and the community at once? What are the things that help empower the individual to become a better servant to his community? Because everything that we're doing to help the individual become self-actualized is for the betterment of the society. That, of course, is made up of nothing but individuals. So this is how we can have a perhaps a more responsible, mature way of learning how to share the commons that we inhabit and keep them from being taken over by nefarious interests that aren't working on behalf of the good of one and all. What people have been trying to do with systems such as communism and socialism and so on and so forth,
fascism and
capitalism
National
and so on,
Socialism
and
and corporatism and any ism, really.
all the isms is this. We have to. You can't honor the sacred without recognizing the sacred. That's the first step. Is that we got to recognize. If we're saying that life is valuable and meaningful, then we're saying that life is sacred and that access to the things that make life possible, like food, water, shelter, things. That all these things are sacred. Education and loving relationships. That these things are sacred. So we treat them as sacred. We honor them deeply. And when we see people that are self-destructive in our societies, well, first, if we are self-destructive in some ways within ourselves, we cleanse and heal that. And we find a way to be able to put a measure against it within ourselves, a strength to resist, or not maybe resist, but to assimilate and overcome, you could say.
Well, I think I think healthy traditions help deal with, like, the free riders and the evil that comes banging at your door. When you have
and then we can
good
keep
traditions
of healthy family, healthy
and then there's
community.
bad traditions that ossify and cause your society to just die the slow death of aging out.
And they're going to be different traditions. They're going to be location specific. Far north in the winter, it's going to be a different set of conditions than when you're in the tropics. It's the ways of people and their cultures will work differently.
Slightly different mushrooms, but they kind of all do the same thing.
There will always be access to the transcendent source wherever you are. Even if you can't find the mushrooms, there will be some breath work that you can do. There's going to be some kind of vision quest that you can go on in some way. There's going to be a shaman.
You might find yourself like starving and lost, and then you have this experience, and then
by the grace of God.
And then 30 hours later, you realize you're right next to the highway, and somebody picks you up and gives you a hamburger, and you're like, oh my God.
Shit happens.
Oh yeah.
It happens.
There's a lot of stories I've been reading lately about that kind of stuff.
There are synchronicities in this world. Nobody can explain them, but they do indeed occur. And, I'm not a new agey person, but I'm open to that stuff. I'm also not saying that I'm certain about anything either, because certainty is so dangerous.
Yeah, the only certainty I have
so dangerous
right now
for us. Put things on scales of potential levels of certainty, of likelihood, but be willing for your view on anything to be changed. It's a great way to orient. Like if we switch from wanting to be right to what's good for one and all, it's a very much more comfortable orientation than constantly having to reprove yourself. You can just shift off of something that was wrong and be like, oh, I was wrong about that. Okay. That's all right. I understand life a little bit better now. Sorry, I cut you off there. What were you going to say?
Oh, no, the only thing I'm certain about is I'm going to be going to sleep within 3 hours
this
or
has
less.
Been a long one. We've been going for just about that 3 hours, and
Hey.
2 minutes and 39 seconds.
I think this is the longest one. Woot, woot.
It might be, man. Yeah, because we don't have the middle break to take out this time.
And it's also episode 20, so like there's something in that. 20, 3 hours, that's like 25. So that's, wait, 20 plus 3 hours is 23. That's a 5. 5 is the only number that exists as itself in the Fibonacci sequence. You got 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. Oh, yeah.
That's why it's longer.
Yeah.
DJ just mathematically
numerology. Yeah, the spirit molecule. I don't know. I'm getting loopy. I don't know.
Spirit molecule is alive and well in all of our
and I'm turning into a
livers
pumpkin,
and perhaps lungs and pineal glands. Indeed, and certainly be swimming through DJ's brain shortly here because he's going to be dreaming, and that's when you get a nice eruption
I get so many
DMT
good dreams,
in the
dude. Well, I won't say good, but like they're adventuresome. We'll say that.
We have to do an episode on dreams sometime here. You do have some really intriguing dream stories. He's got episodic dreams. Like he revisits the same scenario where he left off, basically in the storyline.
I was a superhero with the power of voice, and I used my power of voice to kill the abyssal factors that take over people, and I killed my beloved.
Oh God,
that was the most. It was
the classic Greek tragedy, man. Jesus.
Yeah, and it wasn't just some superficial stuff like like I felt the emotions, but the voice, it was like bah, and then like blah, and then like blah.
That's so cool.
And then there was just a void. And there was nothing there because you can't let those possessed by the abyss, apparently in the dream, you can't let those possessed by the abyss, you can't let their flesh rot or anything go into there because then it corrupts everything. So it's like my little thing was like, oh, I figured it out. Tuning. It no longer exists. Oh, neither does my beloved or my best friend or like those like 60 civilians or they're not good dreams, but they're awesome.
Speaking of speaking into the abyss, I have a poem about this that's like, it goes, let us meet at the root of all that has ever awed us, with the impossible mystery of the cosmos before us, so that we can tunnel through the edge of known space and as self-conscious stardust embrace all of the oblivion before us. Does it not implore us to speak meaning into it, to bear our hearts as sacraments to the emptiness before us? What better place to emit the glowing rush of that force whose word is love?
Bah.
This is what we're here for, guys. Name of the game. Love you all. Man. It's been a good one.
Yeah. Pumpkin mode.
Yeah.
Initiate.
Yeah. We're going to get some rest, guys. You should do the same. And look forward to next week. We're going to be back covering episode 21 of this landmark series. Thank you all for joining. Make sure to like and subscribe if you are enjoying the show. Share with your friends and fam. And see you guys soon.
Who are you?
Oh yeah, I'm Chris. I've been Chris.
I've been DJ.
Yeah.
Signing out.
We'll talk to you soon, guys.